Hello. The video you're about to watch is basically a slightly cut down version of the whole interviews I had with IllusoryWall and Phobia. They were done for this video if you haven't watched it. It's basically just a breakdown of how toxic the community has gotten after a certain point, especially with the use of the Git Good phrase, but it does delve into small little things outside of that too. Now as for what you should watch first, I think either work. If you do watch this first, obviously you're going to get spoiled on some details of the conversation in the other video. But at the same time, I did do the interviews before I wrote the script, so you might even be able to follow my thought process of how I came across that video. So whichever you decide to watch first, doesn't really matter, I think. Just keep in mind that you might be spoiled on the discussions, or you might hear them twice, essentially, for that video over there. And as I said, it is cut down a little bit because there are just some, private detail type things, or things that, wasn't necessarily for the interview, just for my ears only, or for their ears only. But for the most part, it's pretty intact, which I hope comes across due to the video length itself. There's definitely a lot of little discussions that were kind of tangential to the point of the video, so I didn't include them in the actual, finished product. But I thought they were still insightful and interesting, so, I thought maybe you guys would want to hear it. I think that's pretty much it. Enjoy the video. But yeah, I basically just had a couple questions based on... Because for me, I only joined the community... Well, not even joined. I started playing with Bloodborne, and then only joined, during Dark Souls 3 launch or shortly before that.
Gotcha.
So I have very little, practical knowledge about how the community was back then. So basically just got 4 questions. Might not even be that long, but if any of them turn into a conversation, that's fine with me too.
Sure, cool.
And like I said, it's just basically on how the community was receptive to criticism of the games. Because I'm sure I think you know firsthand how fans are these days, where they... just don't receive criticism of games well.
Right.
All right, so the first question is, how do you feel like the community was open to criticism of the games back then? So during Demons, Dark Souls 1, even Dark Souls 2, whatever you have insight to.
Sure. It's hard to say because, I don't know to what extent I would have had blinders on. I remember, so my earliest community interactions would have been, there was a Demon Souls forum. It doesn't exist and it hasn't been archived to my knowledge or anything, so sadly we can't really go back and look at what those conversations looked like. Yeah. So there was the Demon Souls forum, and then eventually I was just posting on Reddit right when Dark Souls 1 launched as well. And it's hard to say how stark of a difference there was between then and now. I do feel like things have gotten a little bit more toxic in terms of, sharing your opinion out on the blue and Twitter might get you all sorts of nasty feedback. But part of me wonders, it's I don't know if people have actually just sort of gotten meaner with that, or if it's an exposure thing, right? If we have these algorithms in place now that sort of reach an audience more broadly than we used to in the conversations we have. So maybe people would have been just as unforgiving back in the day, but I think maybe we were existing in our own pockets a bit more. So what I can say is that, I don't remember those interactions happening as much back in the day. Dark Souls 2 did get a lot of discourse and arguments because there were people who, that was a very polarizing game. But yeah, I don't know. It's trying to gauge the vibe shift is a bit tricky because it's to what element is it a shift in attitude and what element is it a shift in sort of technology and the way we interact online.
Yeah. The vocal minority has gotten really loud in the last 10 years. So just in general, yeah. So if anything, the perception of it, is what seems to be the most harmful these days versus whether it was there all along or not. Dark Souls 2 specifically is definitely an interesting one because, I get the impression that Demon Souls fans just like Dark Souls 1 just as much. It's a pretty similar game, even though there's differences and stuff. But Dark Souls 2, I
was gonna say, you definitely get people who will stand Demon Souls or whatever and be like, that's my favorite game or whatever. But the amount of people who love Demon Souls but hated Dark Souls 1, that's a very almost non-existent. That'd be a tiny fraction. Like you said, they're mostly on board. It's to anyone, if one of those two games was S tier for you, the other one was not worse than A- probably. But yeah, Dark Souls 2 was the one where there was a more sudden break in opinions, of course.
Yeah, is there anything noteworthy for that? Because from my understanding, there's definitely like there could be what a lot of people like to call like recency bias
Mhm.
of a new game from a dev you love. You just you enjoy it maybe the first time, and maybe later on you come back to it or something. And it's just like Was there
Right.
anything like that or anything of like people immediately being on the like yeah, I'm not into this on from the first.
The backlash for Dark Souls 2 was pretty immediate, because of things like the early teasers pointing at like having much better graphics on computer and more interesting lighting.
Yeah.
So like when that was all kind of stripped down, like people were unhappy from the get go. On top of all the differences of iframes being tied to a stat, the general feeling of difference in controller, like there's definitely an alienating experience. I think Dark Souls 2 is a cool game. Like I like it. I don't know where I rank all my games. I think I always put sequels at the bottom. Anytime they start a new universe, Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, those are all my favorites. Dark Souls 2 and 3 are somewhere at the bottom, I think, personally.
Yeah,
But
same mostly. That's funnily enough, yeah.
I still like Dark Souls 2 a lot. I don't know. I go back and forth on this. I might like it more than Dark Souls 3, maybe. I don't know. But I mean, again, like the worst of these games to me is like a B minus or whatever. Like, so there's nothing ever for me to get too riled up at over. But no, I do definitely agree with a lot of the criticisms that were sent its way. But at worst, that always just knocked down a few pegs. But I should say though, so I was never too involved in any of the more heated discussions surrounding Dark Souls 2, but 2 in particular had so much back and forth discussion in the form of video essays. Like,
yeah.
it is a weird phenomena that game had, where it's not just like here's my take on the game, but it'll be like a 3-hour response to someone else's video essay, and then like a 5-hour response to that person's video essay, and it's like, what the hell is going on?
When you think of that, does Matthew Matosis come to mind immediately? Because that's the one I do. But I'm also yeah.
There were other. I didn't really watch like any of those, to be honest. I did watch like Matthew Matosis's like Demon Souls videos. I thought those were great. But yeah. By the time of 2, there was like a whole back and forth H Bomber guy, and others as well.
Yeah, like I mean, I didn't watch him back then. I did watch him later on when he put out like his Dark Souls 1 like just long video. But I think I did get the vibe that he also did get a lot of criticism for that video. Matthew Matosis, obviously, for the Dark Souls 2 critique, where I'm guessing a lot of people who did like it were just on his case about it. And I do think around that same era was when video essays were starting to become a thing, in the sense of like Ego Raptor's Ocarina of Time one, for instance, like where he would criticize a game that was genuinely beloved, and maybe people weren't as open about criticism yet. So I know he got a lot of hate for that too, for instance. I wonder if it's in the same vein or not, but I don't know. that's way back, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that would be the time period where that started to. It's funny to look back and especially some younger viewers might not remember as much because they probably just grew up with this sort of content. But like video essays like didn't exist previously. No. Like that was like that they weren't a present thing in our culture. It took a few different angles of getting there. There was stuff like every frame a painting, which is related to movie discourse, was like a big leap off point. It was already happening before that, but there were a couple like big sort of moments of like, oh, like this is a thing. People like longer discussions about things online. But yeah, I guess we're sort of going on a tangent here about the discourse. But
so for Dark Souls 2 specifically, like, do you feel like criticism was taken a little harshly by some of the fan base at the very least? I know you said you maybe weren't as involved with that part of it, but or was it just, I don't know, accepted as like a differing opinion back then?
That's really difficult to say. Yeah, because there was definitely a lot of fighting back then, but I don't know. Again, I think it was more on forums and smaller pockets where algorithms weren't really bringing these discussions to you. So as much.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so next question. I feel like you've touched on it more, but if you want to give a more focused answer.
The one thing I would add as an addendum to sort of tie my thoughts together on that last topic is sort of the negativity would have been there, but there was less opportunity pardon me, for drive-by negativity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Is
not
what
like
I'd call it.
Yeah, not like a
Yeah,
Twitter attack or something. Kind of
yes.
happens
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so for the next one is, have you felt a shift in how the community responds to criticism? And I think you more or less said, yeah, more or less, or at least the vocal minority.
Yeah. That was definitely, like, for me, the biggest moment of being taken aback recently was when I shared my thoughts about a very specific thing in the DLC of Elden Ring, and people got mad at me on Twitter. That was funny. So in the DLC of Elden Ring, there's an enemy that has a weak point on its back, and it's clear that they just sort of ran short on development time because they just put messages on the ground, like these developer notes that are just like basically just go for the weak spot, and it's like by the beginning of every dungeon where you can encounter them. And it's like, oh, in the base game that would have been like a note you can get from a merchant, or even the DLC had a much better version implemented of that with the there's the note you can find that tells you about the weakness of the furnace golems by a destroyed furnace golem, being like, don't, keep it away from the explosives. Like, what are you doing, you idiot? Like, yeah. And you find one in the environment that was destroyed, so it's like, oh, cool, you can kind of piece together, you have something you can find and put to use. But it felt like they sort of gave up there. So I was just sort of pointing out on Twitter, being like, man, what the hell is up with this? In a tweet where I said I was loving the DLC, I was a lot more receptive to the DLC than you were overall. So even as someone who wasn't really being that negative about the DLC, but was just nitpicking one thing where I thought they handled it poorly, oh man, people were like telling me to shut up, and like, yeah, it was a really weird experience. And like, I'm trying to remember some of the other interactions we had. Maybe you can pull them up and show them in the video. But there's one point where like someone said something, and I was just joking, kind of being like, "Oh, this is why we can't have nice things," and people were just like genuinely mad, being like, "It's you saying this. You're the one like creating the problems or whatever." And I'm just like, "Whoa, like chill." Like,
it's rough too. Like I understand. Well, no, I don't really understand honestly, because I'm like from my perspective, you're just giving a light criticism to something that's just it feels a little rushed. It feels a little bit like needless because from my perspective, as soon as you see that spot, your brain probably registers that as like a weak spot, especially if you're experienced in video games.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think for me too, like again, like my tone might have been a bit of exasperation, where like I wasn't doing full angry video game nerd, but and I didn't tweet these exact words, but I could have ended my post with like, what were they thinking? Like that sort of like kind of response where I'm just sort of being like a little confused as to why this thing was designed that way and just kind of making fun of it. But it's also at the same time, I guess, like, the people who drive by and see that, they get this idea in their head that like they need to defend the game, and they're really upset with this mild criticism, which is just weird because like from my perspective, it's like, oh, if you know who I am and what I do and the way I talk about these games, like I'm the kind of person who will talk about how gravelording is the coolest thing ever and how it also sucks. Like, I can sing the praises and pick apart the things that I don't like about these games. And for me too, especially someone who does a lot more mechanical, mechanics based reviews instead of opinion. Not that my videos don't include opinion, because they do. But I think I've always been somewhat shielded. For a content creator with as many followers as I have, I've been really lucky. I've been really fortunate. Anyone else who has as many followers as I do who talks about video games probably gets a lot more negativity in their YouTube comments than I do. I think because my content is fairly chill. I'm not out here saying this game is great or this game is terrible and people are getting mad at me. I'm explaining how some obscure aspect of a video game works. And then my opinions are more along the lines of like, I wasn't really happy with it and this is how it could have been better. And, it's all pretty mild criticisms that are easy to pick apart from just the factual explanation-based parts. So I've had it relatively easy compared to most content creators, I think. So for me to sort of out of the blue see people get really mad when I pick apart something with mild criticism, I was just like, whoa, this is weird.
Yeah, I was in the same boat because most of my stuff didn't necessarily have opinions on it in the same regard. I mean, I'm still, relatively growing and stuff, but I've been in a similar boat for sure in that regard. I guess for the most part, your videos are not there yet because it was just like, Twitter in this case. But yeah, it is wild. Like, what was I thinking about just now? I feel like I recall one conversation I had on, I think on Twitter as well, where some person was saying something along the lines of like, why would you make content on this game if you didn't like it or something? Which I think it was on the base game, which I did like. So it's just I was still criticizing it. You know, you can still criticize things you like, which is definitely something I feel a lot of people miss.
Yeah, well, and especially since you're clearly a fan of Soulsborne in general, so it's like the broader thing, like the fact that you're reacting to a part of a game or a DLC that you weren't happy with. It's like, yeah, you're allowed to. That's different. You're not generating hate content, right? You're not. The core of your channel isn't just being mad at things. That's a different thing. If someone's doing that, it's like, okay, what are you doing?
But like, I think they're trying to tell me like, oh, you know, Vadi Video or Iron Pineapple don't make, or you know, like they don't make content if they wouldn't like make content if they don't like the game. And I'm like, I mean, I guess so, but I mean, Vadi just discusses lore. He might as well have not liked the game. Who knows? Like,
well, actually, and I apologies to Iron Pineapple if I drag him into this discussion in a way that was without his consent, I guess. But he saw that Twitter thread about me criticizing the DLC, and he was like annoyed on my behalf enough about that that he said to me that like he is less inclined to share his personal opinion on places like Twitter now about stuff. Which again, it's not just from that interaction. I'm sure he's had negative interactions himself. But yeah, he saw. It's funny that he saw that, and it kind of inspired him to being like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm just like not gonna like share opinions on Twitter anymore." Like,
yeah, especially in the last couple of years. Like, it's always been a little bit polarizing, I feel, but
yeah,
it's wild, yeah,
definitely.
Yes, so vocal minority feels like, but just the easier avenue to drive by is a good word for it, honestly.
Yeah, I think about it as drive by. I don't know if other people call it that, but that's how I've thought about it for a while.
Yeah, and the thing is too, like I guess for this particular, like you may not have this context entirely, or maybe on occasion, but I guess comments have always been a little bit of a drive by situation too, because people just see a thumbnail and a title. And just essentially reply to that.
Yes, that is a thing as well. Comment sections can be a drive by. There's like various levels, right? Like, someone on when you go smaller and smaller scale is where it's less likely to happen, right? Like on a forum, there might not be as much, but there can be if it's a big enough forum. YouTube comments, it can happen as well. Like you said, people just see the thumbnail, but it's not quite as bad as Twitter, right? Generally, it's hard to say because it's difficult to see what the cutoff is. But I think on Twitter you might get stuff boosted to the algorithm where a friend of a friend is getting into some arguments and making fun of it, and it's like, oh, if that was within a YouTube comment section, you wouldn't even be aware that conversation was happening. But on Twitter, that can be blasted your way. So
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I think what I would say is that like a lot of those comments usually get buried. Like if there's just a gut reaction to the thumbnail. Usually the ones that get upvoted are the ones that are like, okay, this is a better reflection of the video response at the very least. Which like for me, like the you know, I guess for lack of a better word, the negative videos I've made on the DLC, for instance, a lot of the liked comments are actually like, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm glad someone agrees with me because I felt this too or whatever. And it was just like the early, like, you know, people were already subbed to me for content that was essentially neutral before. Just get the video thumbnail and they're like, oh, I'm not subscribing, this is dumb, Git Gud, you know, all that stuff. Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. Like, that's recently what I've done is just not look at the comments for the next first few hours at the very least, so to not get a lot flooded with just gut reaction stuff. Because yeah, like my pet peeve is when people just see a thumbnail or whatever and just comment on that, when like people understand, like people know what the YouTube game is about these days. Like, yeah, like you understand, like as long as you're not outright lying about what's in the video, like I don't see a reason to get super gut reaction from stuff and comment right away. But
definitely not. Yeah, it's not appropriate.
Yeah, it'd be like that.
But this is a tangent that's not even directly related to the thing. You can cut out from the video or you can include it. It doesn't really matter. But I've been thinking more about social media and toxicity in general a lot lately, with stuff happening on Twitter and the sort of exodus that's happening to Blue Sky is very fascinating. The sort of ecosystem of social media to me, like earlier social media was more about following things you were interested in, and sure there would be toxicity. Forums had drama, the forums had arguments, flame wars. It's there was never. I don't want to look back with rose-tinted glasses too much, pretending like there was a time on the internet where everyone was happy and friendly, because that's not true. But generally speaking, like the earliest days of Facebook, right? It was college students friending other college students. You weren't on there with your family. You weren't arguing with family members. You weren't seeing like propaganda in your feed. You were just following like friends and friends of friends and stuff like that. Early social media, Tumblr, early Twitter, you were just following things you wanted to follow. And again, there might be arguments from time to time, but it was a lot more it was a much more catered experience in the past, where you followed things you wanted to follow, and that's what you were exposed to. Right, like I used to have a Tumblr for IllusoryWall. I used to have a Tumblr for something called Retro Game Audio, where I talked about sound design in older video games. And it's like I never saw people arguing about random inane crap right in my feed. Yeah. Like that never happened. But we've social media veered in this algorithm-based direction where they're just trying to pump all sorts of crazy stuff your way. Facebook is horrendous with it. I mean, I haven't used Facebook in a long time. I only still have an account for Messenger, and Twitter as well. And it's sort of the thing that I've been thinking about lately is dunk culture, right? That's something that invites a lot of the drive-by negativity. Is people just trying to sort of make fun of things they don't like or disagree with. And it's hard to know where to draw the line on what's acceptable, because it is fair for someone to call out something they don't approve of, right? Like especially if you're in a position where you manage a community or something like that, it's okay to be like, hey, what this asshole did is not acceptable, and this is not cool, and this will never be welcome in the community, right? Like there are times and places where you can and probably even should do that. But wherever that line is, I hope we sort of collectively recognize this as a society that like Twitter, where Twitter wound up is completely not the right way of doing that at all. Just making fun of things you don't like and arguing with people just gives it exposure. It doesn't shut it down, and it creates like a symbiosis where even if there's someone I agree with politically and I feel like they have all they're on the right side of things and I agree with their frustrations, if I blocked like a Nazi on Twitter a long time ago and it's leftists who are making me see that Nazi's opinion repeatedly, something is wrong. Like that's what it basically boils down to. And I think there's sort of an awakening with Blue Sky and stuff like that, where dunk culture is very discouraged. They're just like, if you see something you disagree with, just block it. Please don't quote it. Please don't screenshot it. And that's been very successful there so far. So I'm hoping in this discussion that we're having about like, are people a lot more negative lately when you criticize things? I think the way we constructed social media fed into that a lot, but there might be a change where hopefully that might actually happen less, depending on the platforms you use. So,
yeah, here's hoping. I do feel like people are starting to realize that, especially because aforementioned Nazis and stuff started getting blue check marks, and then they got like revenue from their tweets and stuff. So people are like maybe just screenshot this, don't expose like that, but maybe one step further. Once hopefully these things aren't as needed to spread, just so you're aware what's happening in the world. Like, yeah, hopefully, but then people just ignore them, and we can live like that.
Because there is the very valid disagreement that people have is like you can't just ignore bad behavior and expect it to go away, and that is 100% valid. Yeah. However, I think people are starting to realize that it's like, okay, but the way we were engaging in disagreements on something like Twitter is just like an utter cesspool, and like let's not do it like that at all.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a hard line right now at this very moment, especially with last week and stuff, and currently going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Yeah. I do agree generally though, and for this topic at least, I would hope that people. I mean, I do feel like this probably happens for everyone at some point. Like maybe like people who came across my negative videos, for instance, or younger, and maybe haven't been around the block on YouTube enough to hear the words that probably every YouTube essayist has said, like, you can criticize something you like or whatever, or you can criticize something, or someone else can criticize something and you can still like it. You know, just basic things like that doesn't detract from your experiences or whatever. Like, I feel like most people do learn that eventually, I would hope.
Yeah, I would hope a pretty big maturing point in having some media literacy is just not getting too mad when people disagree.
Yeah.
Again, in spaces outside of video games, I can think of stuff like movie reviews, right? Like sometimes people get really upset if a critic doesn't like something that they liked or whatever. But I think something to just remember at the end of the day is like, there's no one in the world that you agree with 100% of the time. Yeah. No one. You know, like, I think of people who have really closely aligned tastes with me, like one of my brothers, right? Like if he says, like, watch this, you're gonna like it. There's like a 99% chance I'm gonna love it. But even then, every now and again, there's just something that we don't agree on, and like that's normal, all right? And to have this sort of attitude where you're just gonna get angry at someone for disagreeing, it's not worth it, and it's a fundamentally immature way of interacting with media criticism.
Yep, pretty much, yeah. Yeah, like that's definitely a good point too, just in general. Like, I would say that there's probably very few things, and, you know, that'll probably be on the political side of, like, you know, like, you don't have to agree on everything to get along and stuff. But, you know, I guess for stuff like this, yeah, that doesn't matter. It's just,
stuff like this. For stuff like this, yeah,
it's video games. Like, honestly,
yeah.
The last couple of weeks alone, that made me, like, even though I'm still gonna put out this video, it's been like, and it's probably gonna be how I close out the video. Like, yeah, this feels a little bit significant in the grand scheme of things these days, but, you know,
yeah.
might as well still address it because it's still
like, there's definitely bigger things to be concerned about and angry about, and it definitely speaks if someone's spending a lot of time in discourse getting really angry about video games. It's not that they don't have other valid issues in their life, because they probably do, but it just shows like a skewed priority, right? Like they're getting really mad because someone disagreed about something in the video game, but it's like an ambulance ride costs $1,000 because you live in the United States. There are other things to be upset about.
Yeah, look, I need grums.
Exactly. Yeah, the grifter culture is a disaster.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so this one, I feel like you probably have at least some experience with, or maybe you've seen it at the very least, so here's something.
Mm-hmm.
But what did the phrase "Git Good" mean back when it was first used? As far as
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was actually going to. I don't know if this is a hot take. I don't know what the consensus is on this. I've seen some people try to defend it as saying that it used to be more of an affirming, encouraging thing, and that it's turned more toxic over time. I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's always been both. That's my sort of perspective on it. I think you have people who kind of say it jokingly because they went through that experience themselves. It's kind of a lot of people bounce off these games at first and fall in love with them after, like, really forcing their way through it. I was a bit different. I kind of fell in love with Demon's Souls, like, instantly in 1-1 Proletaria, because I'm a weird freak. These games were made for me. But I've seen that argument put forward where people felt like it evolved into a more toxic thing. I think it's always been both. It just depends on the context. Sometimes people mean it in a negative way. Sometimes people mean it in a joking way. And then, in addition to that, if you're the recipient of that kind of stuff, these are strangers online talking to you that you don't necessarily have a rapport with. Someone might be saying it jokingly, and you might take it negatively. And that's not totally anyone's fault. That's just sort of the outcome of people, just the chaos of talking with strangers online. But I do at least have the opinion that people should not jump to that, just because it can be, even if you don't mean it in too harsh of a way, it can be interpreted that way. And then, of course, if any people do really mean it in the toxic way, Git Good, that's just like, shut the hell up. I hate that.
Yeah, I mean, and for the context of my video, just to give full disclosure of how it's going to be, like, the thumbnail is going to be literally just "Git Good" in quotes, black background. And then, you know, the idea of the title, you know, it could change with the videos I do and stuff, or how I how this goes forward. But the title I was going to go for is the scourge of the Soulsborne fan base.
Yeah, no, it is overall leans more in the toxic direction. Again, there are people who can say it jokingly, and it can be interpreted. You know, I had to get good too. You know, depending on the context of how you say it, it's not always a bad thing.
Yeah.
But it does turn out that way a lot of the times, and especially anytime it's used to shut down criticism. Of course, that's innately toxic in that context.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of my experience in order to make this video, because yeah, like universally in all the videos I posted that are negative leaning or whatever, one of the first things people point, if they just just clicked on the video, they just type that. Yeah, I probably have a lot of those, just there.
It was funny because I recently did a video sharing my opinions on why I think pausing would be fine in these games. Again, it's one of a few of more like controversial topics I've touched on. Responses were more civil than I was expecting. Again, probably owed in part to the first half of the video being more about the technical aspects, just me explaining, being like, oh, the fact that they're online games really isn't an obstacle, because here's how it would or even already does work in these games. Like it's not, you can pause online, that's fine. Just not during co-op or PvP, really, is all it comes down to. But it doesn't break any of the asynchronous stuff. And I was already scripting that video, so I was going to talk about it anyways, but in the process of working on that video, there was yet another wave of discourse, right? I was just going to do it unprovoked out of the blue. I was just like, okay, the Elden Ring DLC is coming out, so people will probably be talking about this again, so let me just make my video sharing my thoughts. But there was a big wave of a couple of people saying like, oh, this would be good as like an accessibility feature or whatever. A lot of people getting very, very mad about it. And again, this wasn't directed to me as much, but seeing a lot of other people getting the Git Good response. And one of the people who was saying like, oh yeah, I think a pause would be welcome in these games, was someone who does challenge runs of these games, right? She had like videos of her fighting Millennia at like soul level 1 or rune level 1 or whatever. And like the response is like, Git Good, because you disagree with her on like if the game would be nicer for having a pause.
Yeah, another downside of the drive-by comment. It's like you don't know this person. They probably better than you, as far as you know.
Yeah, as a shorthand to like dismiss criticisms, Git Good is one of the most obnoxious. Like, if someone just says that out of the blue to disagree, it's like just want to ban them. Yeah, that's nonsense.
Yeah, and it does suck a little bit how that discussion comes around pretty much every release, because right before or during the release, there's that like difficulty setting discussion, and I have mixed thoughts about all that personally, but at the end of the day, especially when it comes to accessibility, it's like, I don't think there's anything controversial about that, and pausing is more of an accessibility thing, like really.
And my whole thing, for anyone who hasn't watched my video on it, is just sort of like, again, I came from the perspective of I'm someone who has a weird amount of patience with these games. Right, like I'm the freak who like plays them incorrectly just to learn more about their mechanics. So I have a lot more patience with Fromsoftware's design choices than the average player. And I've played through all the games, and I was never really like, oh, if only they had a pause button. Like it never really mattered to me that much. But it was sort of being exposed to the discourse online repeatedly and seeing all of the objections against pausing is what sort of pushed me to the other side. So I didn't come from a perspective of being like, oh, I'm salty because they don't have a pause button. I'm just like, whatever. It's not a big priority to me. But seeing all the arguments being made against it, I was just kind of like, oh no, I don't really agree with any of this.
Yeah, it's just another gatekeep, basically. It felt like.
Yeah, that's sort of what it felt like to me. And there are some valid complaints about, at its core, changing the vibe of the game. If some people like the tension that comes from the lack of a pause. So there are rooms to have some reasonable disagreement there. But yeah, a lot of the other stuff, well, they can't pause because they're online, or it would make the game easier, or we already have quitting out. I'm just like, oh no. Like I disagree with like all of these things.
And then you in that video, you just factually straighten out the argument some people are trying to make, who just they didn't know the game as well as they thought it did. It's like, no, you can pause this game like just naturally. It's built in already. It's just that doesn't seem that way. It
sort of came from the perspective of like, I've been using debug and stuff for years with these games, and I just sort of had the realization of being like, oh, I've been able to pause them in some context with outside tools, and other people haven't. And I'm just kind of like, I've had those times where like enemies are chasing after me, and I pause the game, and then unpause it, and they're still attacking me. And I'm just like, oh, if this is what everyone playing the game normally was doing, they would recommend quitting out, and the enemies would have de-aggroed. I was just like, I've had moments where I was like, oh, pausing is like maintains the vibe and tension of the game better.
Yeah.
Like, I had a sort of slowly like growing opinion over the years once I realized, like, yeah, I've paused these games plenty of times. It's fine. It's
not only that, but I don't even know how the discussion happened when Sekiro exists. That had a pause button.
So the funny thing, some of the dissenting opinions on that, again, I don't want to be too condescending of anyone who disagrees. Like, there are valid disagreements on tension and vibe. But where to me it felt like a biggest stretch, which I really just have a hard time understanding, is when you bring up Sekiro, the fascinating thing that happens is, because there was no backlash to it adding a pause that worked, I think people sort of compartmentalized or sort of squashed the cognitive dissonance by saying, oh, well, it was okay in Sekiro because it's a different kind of game. That was the response I saw in a lot of places, and I was just sort of like, oh, that's weird for me to... I have a hard time understanding that perspective, because it's like, yeah, it's the most different from the Souls games outside of Armored Core in that batch of games. Like, Bloodborne's a little less Souls than, Elden Ring and the rest of the Souls games. Sekiro's even a touch further out, but you can draw a Venn diagram between what a Souls game is and Sekiro, and those two circles are very close to overlapping. like they're not disparate circles; they're close to overlapping very tightly. They are very similar experiences, and that was kind of funny to me. It was like, oh, Sekiro came and went without people getting upset over a pause button. So my sort of take on this is like, people get mad at the idea of adding a pause button because they think it's sort of sanitizing the game or taking away what makes them hardcore. But if they just went ahead and did it, you wouldn't actually mind it or be upset by it. And a lot of people, they don't really trust you when you put that out there. But I'm like, hey, it happened with Sekiro. It was fine.
And not only that, but like, I mean, this argument, I don't always abide by, because there's situations where, you could argue it's still just the fact that it exists can change it, but just don't use the pause button. Then, like, I don't know, like, that's,
yeah. And again, that's one of those things that has a gray area, right? Because it is absolutely true that the option to do something changes the vibe, right? Like, because if you have to pull on self-restraint, that can change the mood of how you interact with something. So I can definitely get, like, there are times when you say, oh, if you don't like something, don't just use it. There are times and places where, like, that's not the greatest response. But I do think that kind of works with pausing. Again, because you could always pause the Demon Souls remake, because it had photo mode.
Photo mode, yeah.
And the number of times I paused the game because I needed to suddenly pause it was like once, twice, maybe. So I don't know how many people out there would actually be like, step into a boss room and just start pausing constantly, right? Like, or if you think of games that allow pausing, right? Like, I'm playing through the Silent Hill 2 remake right now. It's kind of like, I haven't entered a fight and just like impulsively started pausing constantly throughout the fight. Like, if I use too many healing items, I might load the save because I might save scum, because I'm kind of, I'm kind of that way with like survival horror games. I want to hoard my resources.
Yep.
So I might do some things that are kind of cheesy, but I don't know. I feel like the idea that it would ruin the vibe because you would be pausing constantly, it's like, it doesn't reach a point where that's on you. I mean, I don't know that you would actually be pausing constantly just because the option existed. You could just not do that.
Yeah, it for a fast-paced game like the modern FromSoftware at the very least, it doesn't feel like it would be that helpful for the most part.
No, again, one of the valid concerns of pause buffering, which you could easily design around, make it so that you can't repause after unpausing for a half second, a full second. You could make it so that the screen kind of blurs out while it's paused. So maybe you can't like queue up a parry, right? Like, you could have, and again, that would be advanced techniques anyways. If you're at the game of like pause buffering to like land parries, it's like you're already gonna find all of the cheese the game possibly has, right? Like, that's not gonna ruin the Viber experience for the core audience at all. those would be really advanced techniques. But you could design around them, and yeah, I don't know. So there's definitely like sorry, I kind of forgot where I was even going with this, but
I forgot to.
just rant about pausing. Who even cares at this point?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely relevant in a lot of ways, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there was always room for disagreement, I think, because there were janky aspects of these games, right? These are double A. I mean, they're triple A games now, but they're double A or whatever you want to call them games. That's how they started. That's what Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 were.
Yeah.
And these games had all sorts of rough edges, mechanics. I just posted a short about how Miracle Resonance is working again in Dark Souls 1. It's been broken for over 10 years. It doesn't work in any version of Dark Souls Remastered. It basically only worked on Xbox 360 and the original PC release, sort of. That's assuming you had good network connections on the PC version, a separate issue.
That was the thing that boosts your miracles when you're in that circle,
yes.
right?
Yeah. It hasn't worked in like every version of Dark Souls, basically, aside from Xbox 360. And again, PC sort of, original PC, Prepare to Die edition. And it's just like, yeah, like this is a game with like these games are broken in a lot of ways. They have a lot wrong with them. So criticizing them is fine. It should be fine. You shouldn't get mad when someone does it.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah. Like I've always described, since we're talking about like double A and all that. Like I always thought that Demon Souls, at the very least, because of the environment it was kind of created on, I've always called it like a triple A game, but with the spirit of an indie game, because of how Miyazaki was able to just take full control over it, because people consider it a failure as it is anyway.
Yeah.
So he just yeah.
I sometimes think about the origins of that game, and like, we have anecdotes. We do know some story that it was Sony wanted them to make a competitor to
Skyrim or Oblivion.
Oblivion. Yeah. Elder Scrolls. I was trying to think of the series name for a second. Yeah. So it was originally gonna be first person, and like it's just very funny because like Fromsoftware was the worst company you could have hired to try to make an Oblivion like or a Skyrim like that was just not in their wheelhouse, and it was not gonna happen. I think they were hopeful looking at Kingsfield, thinking like, oh well, they do a first person fantasy thing currently, so yeah, let's expect them to make like a big world with lots of NPCs, and so like nope.
And look at them now.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, the game has weird origins, but the quality of Demon Souls is genuinely shocking.
Yeah, like I mean, take it from me, who was in the speedrun scene. That game was built surprisingly sturdy. If you can call it.
No, and when you look at the evolution, because again, people will talk about how like sometimes they'll talk about the different Souls-likes as being spiritual successors, being like Bloodborne was a spiritual successor to Dark Souls. Dark Souls was a spiritual successor to Demon Souls. But those are all basically sequels, right? Like in terms of the lore is completely different. They're not the same universes. They're not a series in that context. But in terms of like game design, leap in quality, they're all a core thing that's very cohesive. When people talk about Demon Souls being like a spiritual successor to Kingsfield, that is a completely different beast. That is just not like, sure, spiritual successor doesn't mean one thing, so both of those statements are true, but that's just on a whole different level. The fact that they pulled Demon Souls out of that, like, again, you look back at Demon Souls and it doesn't have a ton of armor sets compared to later games. It doesn't have a ton of weapons. But when you think about what the different weapons can do, you have a bunch of different weapon types. You have your subtle combos, right? Like if you backstep an attack with a weapon or you run an attack with a weapon, there's a lot of movesets and stuff like that. And just for all of that stuff to just happen with Demon Souls, coming from like Kingsfield and stuff like that is just like, what the hell? And I know Kingsfield wasn't the only, they were doing other games on the PS2 and stuff like that as well, but and Armored Core had complexity, so I think that's where they probably, they developed a lot of those skills as well. But yeah, it's just wild. The leap to Demon Souls from what they were making before is just like the graphics were really good. A lot of Demon Souls looks better than Dark Souls 1.
I agree.
Yeah, there are chunks of that game that just look nicer, and it's just like,
Yeah,
the hell from Soft? Like, what? How did you put this together? How did this? You made the most of that Sony money? Like, holy shit!
yeah. To me, I always think of it as like it just had like a more of an art direction rather than like hyperrealism or whatever. Which Dark Souls feels like it's trying to lean more that way, even though it still has artistic stuff to it. But I mean, I guess it also is probably worth mentioning that I think Demons did have more like development time. It wasn't as crunched as Dark Souls 1. I think.
Right. It's probably something they were chipping away at longer. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't know the date specifically for Demons started, especially after like I think he did have like a change in management basically, right, for Miyazaki or something. I don't know. Either way, off topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question, but again, we can tangent as much as we need to from that.
Sure.
And I thought of it today, funny enough. Do you think the higher emphasis on challenge runs and things of that nature as of late could be a factor as well?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. It's funny to me because I associate the challenge run community with very positive vibes, really. Challenge runs innately get very silly a lot of the times. There might be like pretty standard ones, low level, don't level up, but sometimes they just get so goofy and weird that you're basically just playing the game incorrectly, right? And incorrectly with air quotes. There's no wrong way to play a video game if you're having fun, of course. But I mean, you're going against the grain to such a ridiculous level that I think people find it funny, and it's a very entertaining way to watch games being played. But I guess there is the flip side where it's if people are beating these games all sorts of with their hands tied behind their back, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, that sometimes gets used by people to sort of criticize others' achievements, right? Like there's I took down this boss. I was someone celebrating that they finally beat a boss in Elden Ring, and then there's going to be the wave of people who say, "Oh, did you use summons? Did you use magic?" Right? They're going to go through that sort of checklist of trying to belittle that experience.
Uh-huh.
And did you use summons? Did you ashes? All that sort of stuff. But yeah, I feel like that could be born partially as a spin-off of these people have seen the games played in all sorts of crazy ways, so they're trying to hold a casual playthrough to a higher standard, which is totally messed up and extremely inappropriate.
Yeah,
but I don't know. That's definitely something that's happened to an extent. But I wouldn't look at the challenge run community as something that's like bred like a ton of that. I think it's just people latch onto things they can be negative about, regardless of what's out there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason that I think of it that way, just in the context of how the community has changed as of last couple of years, is just because when I think back on Demons all the way to maybe Bloodborne, for as far as challenge runs, there was your usuals. There was the soul level ones. There was like a weapon specific, no leveling, that kind of thing. It feels to me like Dark Souls 3 onward kind of did, and it probably is because of the gameplay, like just kind of like people started doing more challenge runs that are just
challenge. Yeah. Like the challenge run scene exploded. Like there is so many more challenge runs than there used to be. Not only the feedback loop, because like that's something that might get views and it encourages other people to create that content, but I think just the games grow in popularity. So there's more of a hunger for like, oh, someone's playing this game in a funny way, let me give it a watch. So it inspires people to play the games in more and more absurd ways. Just the precedent of there being challenge runs, right? Because the earliest challenge runs were Soul Level 1, right? Like there wasn't really anything fancy, and it's
like a 3-hard run, like in Zelda or something.
Yeah, once people realized that wasn't inherently too difficult in something like Dark Souls 1, it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, now do it without magic, because pyromancy made that really not that tough. And then it's just sort of, with each title, people go in with this foreknowledge, this existing knowledge of like, oh, these are challenge runs people used to do, but they keep stepping it up. So it's just, whether it's playing the game with ridiculous controllers, there's someone like playing these games with like a flute or a recorder. Like it's like
yeah, I've seen with the camera, I've seen with their mind, because technology is fucking crazy. But
yeah, it's really funny. I think it's cool as hell. I like the ones that sometimes use modding to pull it off too. I think Lobos did one where it was like Dark Souls 1 where you didn't have any stamina, right? Because you just use like cheat engine to like have stamina like locked at 1 the whole time, or like so something stupid, right? Like can you beat? It sort of spawned it because now that's a thing, right? This whole genre of video of like can you beat will be like the video title. Can you beat the Elden Ring without using what so and so? Can you beat this game without walking? I think was a recent one. You'd have to. Your only movements can be like attacking or whatever.
Attacking or like a Ashevore,
God, that's so cool.
It's like for sure. As far as like all that stuff for content wise, like personally for me, not really my cup of tea because it does get carried away to such degrees that I'm like, well, it kind of lost its novelty. It's just like you said, it's almost a different game at that point. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I don't actually watch a lot of challenge runs, so it's funny as much as I'm seeing it's praising, but I love the concept of it. So every now and again, there's a certain one that catches my fancy, but yeah, I can't say it's not something I'm up to speed on. I really should watch more of that stuff because someone who makes nerdy videos about these games, breaking things down, how they work in them, there's a lot about these games I don't know. A lot of practical knowledge stuff I kind of don't bother with because it's like people are really, really good at ironing out these builds, build science, PvP science. And I'm just like, oh, that's going to inevitably happen on its own anyways, but I don't know if someone's going to examine how fall damage works in one of these games. So I just sort of latch onto these weird like side things, but like if you want to ask someone like, oh, like what's like a really specific build that would be great for this purpose, I would just be like, oh, don't ask me. I'm like there are people who do challenge runs who definitely know a lot more about these games in ways that I don't. So
for me, just looking at the community, because even though I don't necessarily watch them, I do have like friends who are friends with like Miss Mika and stuff like that. From my perspective, like I don't think that people are like the main content creators who people watch are toxic by any means.
Most people are very positive. There, of course, you get random people who are weird, but no, that's something I'm optimistic about in general. The majority of content creators doing stuff like that are cool and chill people.
Yeah, I think the only things that the downside from that is because people see these games being broken to insane ways. Not broken, but like just like destroyed in such specific ways and stuff and difficulty challenges. I do feel like, especially on places like Twitch or maybe YouTube as well, like people will like just be desensitized essentially to just beating a boss for the first time because they forgot what that experience is like at this point from watching.
Yeah, you're right, and I probably miss a lot of that since I don't live stream.
Yeah,
right. And again, I do video analysis of stuff where gameplay isn't even I'm running these games with enemy AI disabled or my health at full, like locked at full. Like I'm not playing these games normally.
You're doing the opposite.
Yeah, I'm doing the opposite. Yeah, if there's any big Souls content creators who actually need to get good, it's me. Come at me.
Yeah. No, it's probably just an issue of trickling down like that. Yeah, like I would say thankfully it's not the kind of thing where the content creator has to be responsible for their community because you can't just, like as long as they are not specifically calling people like noobs or whatever for not doing what they do, like it's probably just out of their hands. But yeah, it is a thought and definitely something I'm still thinking about whether I should include in the video or not. Like not necessarily to call out challenge winners or anything, but it is an interesting angle to me because it feels a little bit correlated where like as of more recently as the internet evolved into be more like drive-by, as you've been saying, and slash also the games have been taking more of like a more of a combat oriented focus. It does feel like they go almost hand in hand, but maybe it's just complete coincidence in this case. But it's still definitely something I've thought about as a potential like source, but maybe not.
I mean, that's an interesting thing to consider. Because you're right. I mean, there is an element of people showing up in streams and just again, like someone beats a boss for the first time, and it's the well, you didn't do it like this crazy run that I saw. Like you said, desensitized was a good word for it. Like they're used to watching absolute freaks play these games and be really, really good at them, and that might affect the discourse in some way.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. That's all the questions. I mean, do you have any other thoughts about just this topic of discourse like around criticism about getting good, whatever it is?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Again, I might have rambled on it a bit too much before with my discussion about social media in general. But again, I'm hoping in general that with people starting to leave Twitter and going to a clone that looks the same up front but has a different dynamic in terms of like how people interact. I'm just sort of hoping that people sort of have the internet has a collective moment of self-reflection. Obviously, the majority won't. A lot of people won't. But I still think at least some millions of people are going to look back at how we've been using social media over the last 10 years, 15 years or so, and just sort of been like, this didn't go in the best direction.
Yeah,
and a lot of it has to do with toxicity and the way we interact. And I think people have an appetite for vibes that are less nasty.
Yeah, that's actually reminded me something I was going to say earlier in that topic too. I do think that it probably will inevitably go that direction, or hopefully at the very least. But at the same time, it's probably like worth like thinking that most normal people aren't necessarily like that. It's not like everyone is on Twitter and stuff. It probably is just the people who are just terminally online at the end of the day. So, and if anything, hopefully they just touch grass, for the lack of a better term, more.
The thing that I always try to remember with online interactions, and again, no one's perfect. There have been times where maybe I got a little angry or something like that. I like to think I'm pretty chill overall, though. The thing that I try to keep in mind is like, let's say two people were talking at a party, right? You find out one person there is a big fan of Dark Souls or whatever. You would probably bond over that, right? Like you would probably be like, oh, hey, that person, if you didn't meet them in person and you were talking to them online, could be someone you might have a heated argument with because you disagreed with them about what their favorite Souls game was, right? And so there is just sort of, and again, that's inherent to all interactions online. You can't really fault that's a broader issue than just the way a site like Twitter is being run. But that's something you always have to keep in the back of your mind. Is there's so many interactions where people just get nasty online because they're behind a computer. The reasons for that are probably myriad. I'm not a psychologist. I can't really break down why that happens. There's some element of safety. You're more comfortable talking shit because
anonymity,
the other person is there. Anonymity. But it could also be just the depersonalization. The fact that you're not seeing their facial expressions when you talk to them just pushes the conversations off the rails in a way that wouldn't have happened if it was in person. There could be a whole variety of reasons, but yeah, people are quick to get mad at things where they might be getting mad at people who would be friends IRL. So, that's something to just look out for and be wary of,
Yeah, that's probably even doubly so because, on the internet, at this, especially, post Elden Ring, post Dark Souls 3, where they kind of took it to new heights, you probably won't be lacking for people who like the games. You probably have to bond over more specific things.
Oh, more niche things. Yeah. Elden Ring's mainstream now. That's wild.
Yeah. It's simultaneously the best and worst thing that happens to the FromSoft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with what we were talking about, and you can cut it or whatever, but I just hope they don't make open world games going forward. I mean, they can make some more. I don't. Elden Ring doesn't have to be the only one, but I don't want it to replace. And I think they made a comment about not all their games in the future can be as big as this one, and I'm like, thank God. Like, please, please. Oh my God, because I want a game that's just all. It feels funny even saying the word legacy dungeon now because that was just the norm prior, but there should be a new game, Soulsborne, that's all legacy dungeons and nothing else.
Yeah, for context, the future press guide just called them legacy dungeons too. Like it's like I don't know if that's where it started or not, but I tweeted this like a while back. I think after the DLC, and I was like, man, I really miss just like the Demon Souls type games at this point because of like all the combat oriented stuff. Like not just open world, but also that. And one particular person just told me like, well, you just don't play the games anymore. Then I'm like I just said like, okay, like that's possible. I don't know. We'll see. But at the same time, I thought later, it's like, it's not like they only make one game at a time these days. Like they've done seems to have like at least two at once, at the very least. Maybe more if you think of Durasane as well, like things like that. So I think there's a good chance that, hopefully if they do an open world, which I assume they would just because the success of Elden Ring, even though I think whatever
it's
they
gonna
do,
happen again. Yeah.
Like I think whatever they do, they'll still probably do really well. as long as it's like multi-platform. But that doesn't mean that there can't be like a demon style or whatever that's not open world, or maybe they can try something else like Sekiro that's a little bit more unique at the very least. So
yeah. I'm fingers crossed for a more scaled down world experience, because that's definitely like a. I enjoyed Elden Ring. Again, like I said, I put it above Dark Souls 2 and 3 overall. But
I've been missing it. Yeah, I've been missing it too.
Yeah. I'm just kind of like, it was fine as a different experience. Like, oh, how well does the Combat of a Souls game apply to an open world environment? Like, what is it? You know, now you're navigating an open world game space, but you still have the Souls combat. I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, it was fun. But I'm just, I don't. I'm the type of person who likes to explore every nook and cranny, and that gets there's a point where that gets a little too tedious in a game like Elden Ring, where it just works so well in Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1. Like,
yeah, I like to call that the completionist like style. Just like if you just like to do everything, even if it's not the first playthrough or whatever, just for fun. I guess it just comes naturally. And they lend themselves well to that, which is a different. It's weird. Like I thought of making a video on even this topic, but like there's definitely like a spectrum of like open world, because some people would say that Dark Souls is like a soft open world game. You know, it's mostly interconnected.
That's an interesting thing. Early marketing referred to it as open world, right? Because I think there's not much. I tried looking this up again recently and couldn't find too many examples of it. But I swear there was some publication. I can say with confidence that no one called it a 3D Metroidvania.
That would be more apt even,
Yeah, no one called it that. And again, that gets pushed back because people are very, very picky about the definition of Metroidvania. I say it has the world design of a Metroidvania, but it is, not. It doesn't have to be considered a Metroidvania. It's funny talking about the discourse, because some people would call it that because it's non-linear. To me, I tend to have a much more strict definition of open world, where I'm like, I look at Dark Souls 1, I'm like, no, that's definitely not open world. But you're not wrong, though, because some people would call it that. And there was, when it launched, like, an uncertainty of how to refer to it.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like in music where you call a riff or a lick or a solo. There's just a weird gray area where you kind of.
There's a gray area.
Yeah, where it's not defined, but people have a feel for what is a riff versus a lick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To me, open world has got to have just those big open fields where there's many connection points. Like because Dark Souls 1 is very non-linear in how many different ways you can interconnect levels, and the order of bosses can vary to an absurd degree. But every level has a tight single entrance and exit, unless it's a branching path. But even those branching paths themselves are tight corridors, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this is not a field where you can be like, oh, I crossed that field into that area from the east side or the west side. It's like, no, this is not.
Yeah. It's a weird spectrum. Yeah. Okay, I need to use a restroom, so probably a good time to call it. But good chats. I enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, I enjoy just talking anyways in general. So
yeah, likewise. All right, yeah. So I only have like 4 questions, but we can expand on any of them as long as we need to. But yeah, so the first question I have written down is, how do you feel the community was open to criticism of the games back then? Meaning like Demons, Dark Souls 1 or 2 even, like as far as you know, because I know it's not guaranteed that you may know how that was.
Okay, well, that is not a simple question to start.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'm old school, right? The first Souls game that I ever played was the Atlas North American version of Demon Souls that I borrowed from a friend of mine in high school. He was just like, I don't know, I guess I had a reputation for liking hard games even back then, and he was like, you got to play this like super hard, impossible to beat game from Japan, and all this, and whatever Demon Souls' reputation was back then. And this is so old. I played Demon Souls on a CRT. This is before I had a flat screen TV.
Oh damn!
So like,
I kind of want to try that.
It was hard to see. It was hard to see. I'll tell you that. But yeah, so and we talked about this briefly before, but there was very little information on this game at that time. And so there are things like, you learn pretty quickly, like, oh, if I dodge, I don't take damage. I can't attack if my green bar is empty. Like, there are things that you just pick up if you've never heard anything about like a Souls formula on your own. But there are also things that you don't pick up. Like knowing that diminishing returns kick in at 40 is like, how would anyone know that?
Yeah.
Or knowing that you have to like, you probably know this better than me, but you have to upgrade, your rapier to a +6 or whatever it is before you can go down the Mercury path. It's like, who decided this, So there were no wikis yet when I played. So when you looked up information, pretty much the only source was GameFAQs, and someone would make a forum post being like, how do I put my Mercury Stone in my rapier? And someone would be like, oh, you have to upgrade to +6 or whatever the number is. So it's hard to say in terms of criticism, because how do I phrase this? Everyone went into Demon Souls with the perspective that the game was unfair. So it was like, if you come in to GameFAQs and you're bitching, then people are just like, well, why are you playing the unfair game then? So it wasn't so much like Git Good as much as like, know what you're in for when you get into this. So people then were very helpful, and there was a community. It's hard to explain. I think it was ultimately just the size. There were far less people there.
Mm-hmm.
So when a new person posted, you're like, oh, someone new is playing Demon Souls for the first time. And so it was an interesting, novel thing. Whereas now, like, in regards to Elden Ring, which of course the player base is just massive. I don't know what Elden Ring's sales numbers are at this very moment, but I know they're just ridiculous compared to Demon Souls, right?
Yeah.
So I think the opposite is true with the Souls community today, if you want to call Elden Ring the Souls community, which is, they're like, no, if you haven't played at this point, if Elden Ring is your first game, get out. Like, I think it's very hostile, whereas Demon Souls was more accepting because they wanted a community. So yeah, I think it was ultimately just size, but I do think, some people that don't know what they're in for when they play Elden Ring, like maybe they just think it's like an Assassin's Creed, or it's, some other like AAA game where they're like, okay, I'm just gonna, pop this in and it's gonna be challenging for a bit, but I'm gonna have a narrative, story-driven experience and I'm gonna watch the credits. I don't think they fully anticipated, like, oh no, I'm gonna make it to Stormvale and not be able to beat Godric. Like, I've heard so many people that played Elden Ring for the first time and didn't make it through Stormvale. And so I think when they get the like Git Good shoved in their face, it makes them mad, obviously. Whereas I don't think that necessarily Elden Ring is harder than Demon Souls, but when someone went on GameFAQs and said, hey, I can't beat Phalanx, somebody would say, oh, it's okay, try using fire. Or it was the way that people respond to one another, and that all has to do with the size of the community, I think.
Yeah, that overall makes sense. Yeah, just like if I see it just from just any perspective, kind of similar to that these days. Just in a community of people, generally people speaking, you'll be happy to just have anyone as long as they're not shitty, I guess. So yeah, it makes sense. I mean, these days, yeah, and like finding what was it? I think Illusory was the one that described this to me like this. He said that it like if you find a Souls fan in the internet, it's like not a surprise. But if you find one in the wild, it's like a thing to connect with, kind of thing. Even though you could do,
yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. So, if I saw someone like walking down the street with an Elden Ring T-shirt, I'd be like, "Hey," even though like, why should that surprise me?
yeah. Like I guess that would be similar just online back then to the degree, because especially hasn't gotten as bloated back as it is now. Yeah, so, and what would you say, like, would you say Dark Souls 1 changed any of that, or even 2, if you want to get to that too?
I mean, Dark Souls 1 changed it somewhat because it launched on Xbox. So there were a bunch of Xbox players that had never heard of Souls that got to join the community. I mean, if you if you watched any YouTube videos of Dark Souls 1 back then, when I say back then, I mean like 2011 to like 2014.
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, it was recorded on an Xbox because the 360 had such a larger install base in the PS3, right?
Yeah.
So just if someone has a console from that generation, it was probably an Xbox. So if someone is making Dark Souls videos, they probably played it on Xbox, as opposed to you can only play Demon Souls on PS3. So by factor of it being exclusive, it's just gonna have a smaller community overall. So I think it certainly grew. I don't know that the attitudes about the game necessarily changed, but I also think Dark Souls 1 is easier to comprehend if it's your first game. Like, when you I say that the Ember system is a little confusing, knowing that you can go like +5 on a sword and then you stop, and then you have to go get another item to go from +6 to 10 is kind of strange.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe it was just my comfort with the game that was clouding my judgment a little bit.
I mean, I would say the Ember system still was a little bit weird, but definitely not as bad as Demons. So there's that.
It's not as bad, certainly.
Yeah, and if you have a special weapon which doesn't stop at 5, or rather, it stops completely at 5. Rather, yeah, like it works better for you.
Oh man, yeah. There were so many people, I think, that
Drake Sword,
on their first playthrough of Dark Souls 1, where maybe, but I was just gonna say some twinkling weapon.
Yeah.
Where they were just like, well, I found this whatever it is, and I've put stones in it because I just had them, and no other weapon that I had could take these kinds of stones, and I'm checking the damage, and it's 100 more, so I've been using it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still swear by the Astora Straight Sword to this day. I know that weapon is terrible, but it's great. You pick it up in the Valley of Drakes, and it's strong right away. I love it.
Yeah, I never used it, but yeah, I mean, it is a twinkling one, right? I think.
Yeah, it has bad scaling. That's the only issue.
Okay, so maybe not for endgame is all, but so like a Drake Sword kind of thing, I guess.
Yep, pretty much. It's just a magic Drake Sword kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, in between those two games specifically, I definitely wouldn't see there being a problem because, I tell Illusory this as well. Like, I think generally people who came from Demon Souls, probably like Dark Souls 1. It's different in a lot of different sort of ways, but it's still very similar. They're probably most similar in the series, I would say.
Sure.
So,
I will say I don't think I've ever heard any opinion, especially back then, of someone being like, posting on GameFAQs or wherever people are talking, like, ugh, don't buy Dark Souls 1. Demon Souls is much better. Like, nobody said that. Everyone was like, no, these are both great games, is kind of what I always heard. If Estus is make or break for you, I guess I could see it, but
I mean, I would hope that
just
Estus is...
Don't put this on the internet, Berto, but just between you and me, I prefer the grass system to Estus.
Oh, really?
I like when Bloodborne did blood vials. I think it's cool that you have to farm. I think that's fun and punishing, and don't put this on the internet, Berto.
Wow, I mean, even for me, like I don't mind the grass system, especially once I get used to the games and stuff, but yeah, that is indeed an opinion. Yeah. Yeah, okay. And for Dark Souls 2, do you think anything shifted there? Because I feel like that is kind of a shift point for the community and whatever there was back then.
Yeah, I definitely have thoughts on Dark Souls 2. I want to say this before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I did notice that definitely changed. And I don't necessarily know that this is Demon Souls veterans whose behavior changed. I think it is more likely people that played Dark Souls 1 and then played Demon Souls after. But in terms of invading specifically, obviously there was a big community, I guess, if you want to call it that, around the Forest Covenant in Dark Souls 1, where you could go on YouTube and watch like PvP videos and stuff of people in the forest, and that's where people chose to fight. So I guess like some metas, kind of developed quickly there. I remember getting invaded a few times in Demon Souls before Dark Souls 1 came out. And they were definitely people that had no idea what they were doing. It was just, like, I've got a club and I've got some fire bombs. And like, that was the guy, And so you're both just like flailing at each other doing 10 damage. And it was just chaos. After Dark Souls 1 came out, people figured out the meta in Demon Souls. And when I say that, I mean like around that time, if you got invaded in Demon Souls, they had Acid Cloud, they had the Scraping Spear, and they were going to soul suck you. So like there was an era post Dark Souls 1, you probably want to play offline in Demon Souls. And I think maybe the Forest Covenant might have had something to do with that. But yeah, I think it's just this is what happens when the community grows, right? Like the bad apples appear.
And not only that, but the optimization happens, because I do feel like, unfortunately, for the most part, like the only time you'll get to have like the genuine intended experience for invading in like, oh, I need like a Stone of Eternal Lies or whatever. Like it'll only be in like the first few weeks. And then after that, for the most part, invaders would be people who just like invading. And, there's definitely some, even as someone who likes invading just in for the sake of it, definitely a little bit unfortunate for that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
And that's not just, that is true for all games, by the way. That is not just a Souls thing.
Yeah,
so
that's what I mean by optimizing.
We're not just criticizing Souls for this. That is something that all, competitive games do.
Yeah, like that's what I meant with optimizing. Like once people figure it out, they're just gonna use the most optimal thing. And I definitely don't love that most cases. Even invading, like I don't love using the most OP thing. I just like using my character, like not my build.
Do you play any trading card games, Berto?
No, not really. Like I did Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day. That's it.
Okay, I was gonna say I'm like hardcore into Yu-Gi-Oh. I did like I played professionally for several years, and I have like a judging license from Konami.
Oh wow.
Yu-Gi-Oh is the perfect example of what you're describing, because everybody loves the game when a ban list drops and everyone's trying to figure out the new meta. And then after a few months, when everyone's waiting on the next ban list, nobody has anything positive to say about Yu-Gi-Oh, because we figured out the like 3 cards that work, that is just it's all games.
And especially really with how like wild the effects got after a certain point too, like from my understanding. Because I'm very old school, which I think they have a format for it now. I think it's called like Edison or some shit. Like I don't know what it's called.
Edison is synchro. It is, you can use synchros only.
Yeah, that might be.
You're probably thinking about Goat, which is if you're going to use an extra deck, it has to be Fusion.
Okay.
Which is like
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So that'll probably be most along my. Even though Fusion to me was also kind of meh as well. Like I don't know. The most practical experience I have with it is like the 2003 Game Boy game, the Game Boy Advance game.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of people that like playing back then, where it's like if you want to use a trap, you must set it first. We're playing old school Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, Dark Souls 2.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, I was in the beta for Dark Souls 2. And I'm trying to think of a way to say this that doesn't make me sound like an asshole. I think I'm just going to sound like an asshole. I don't think I have any way to say this. I played the beta, and I enjoyed it because it was Huntsman's Cops. And it was way different in the beta. And there were far less enemies, and there was no poison butterflies, and the final boss was the Executioner Chariot and not the Skeleton Lords. Then I bought Dark Souls 2, and I was like, this game sucks. And then I made it to Huntsman's Cops, and I was like, well, at least I'm going to have a fun area. And then I was like, they changed it. I hated Dark Souls 2 day one. I never liked it. I thought it was slow. I thought it was clumsy. It had terrible item durability. And that is like one of my pet peeves in games, is when items break. I know we've talked about Breath of the Wild before. One of the reasons that I have trouble getting into Breath of the Wild is because of the item durability. So Dark Souls 2 was very frustrating to me. And it taught me a lot about the community. Because when Dark Souls 2 launched, if you were there in 2014, I think it was, you know that everyone was just glazing Dark Souls 2. When it came out, everyone, the universal opinion was this game is better than Dark Souls 1. Everybody thought that. And it took a solid 6 or 7 years for people to finally admit, like, okay, I like the game, but it does have problems. And that taught me people get blinded by novelty. Whatever the new game is, they're going to like because it's new and because they haven't, it's like you just described, they haven't figured out the meta yet. The fun is finding the meta, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think you can really trust people to have a candid opinion when a new game launches if that game is good or bad. I think you have to wait years to find out. At least as a community. Of course you can have your personal opinion.
Yeah.
My personal opinion never changed, but I know a lot of people's did. And it taught me something about myself also, which is I don't mind playing the same game over and over and over. So the novelty aspect doesn't affect me as much. And I think we're even seeing a little bit of that with Elden Ring. Because, you know, obviously when Elden Ring came out, people were just amazed by the scope of the game and, you know, just some of the enemy behaviors and all the boss fights and all this sort of stuff. And on my my most recent Elden Ring upload, it has comments saying, more Dark Souls 2 too. And I was like, whoa, are people actually like, is Elden Ring beginning to get a negative opinion? I don't know. But I guess what my point is, if Elden Ring does end up with a negative opinion, it will take years for that to be uncovered.
Like as a whole, you mean? Just
as a whole, right?
Yeah,
right.
In the same sense as Dark Souls 2, yeah.
Yeah, and also, that's not to say that, like, obviously you're allowed to have opinion that differs from the community. I have that a lot, but
Yeah.
my point is just if you're talking about like the internet as like a choir of people that just chant nonsense, you know?
Yeah. Like basically it'll take a while for everyone's opinion to settle without nostalgia bias or not recency bias rather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's yeah. Like even coming from me, I mean, I don't want to say I'm immune to it because, you know, like we're human, but I want to say that for me, I'm conscious of that. And I've had very few times in my life where, like, at least in a negative sense, like the only example I could think of where I immediately knew I didn't like something was Last Jedi. I was like, I don't know if I like that, like in theaters, which even that was kind of in the same vein. Like people just loved it, and then maybe took some time for people to come down from it.
I can't comment on that. I'm the worst about when I watch a movie in theaters. The theater experience hits me so hard. I'm just like, oh, that was such a great. I can't judge a movie fairly in theaters at all. I love the theater too much.
Interesting, yeah. No, for me, I mean, like I said, it was a rare exception in the negative side of that, where I knew right away I didn't love it as much. Like I just didn't find it that appealing. I actually haven't seen it in a while now. I would be curious to see how I feel about it now, which I guess is the difference for me. Like I'm willing to give things another try after some time. For me, like
I don't know if go ahead.
I was gonna say, like for me, I don't know, like things like Dark Souls 2 would have changed. Like I also didn't like it. Well, I was fine with it at first, and then after playing the rest, I was kind of like, because I had a weird order, but yeah.
I think a big thing for me on that was just adaptability. I don't think I fully knew how much adaptability mattered for iframe, so I was just getting hit a lot during rolls, which made me mad. And now that I do understand the way adaptability works, I think it's dumb, and I still don't like it.
Yeah, like you hate it more almost, I would say. Yeah,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to go into this, you know, if you want to include this in the interview or not, but this is something I want to touch on briefly. This is something I've talked about with like my friend group some. I feel like there is a certain percentage of like video game players, and they really annoy me. It's a group that I don't know that they have the capacity for developing nuanced opinion. And what I mean by that is like they play everything. Like when they get an ad for a game, it's like they don't even consider, is this going to be a good game that I will enjoy playing? They're just like, oh, a new game, I'll buy it. So they just buy every $60 game that that comes out. They play it to completion one time, and they go, okay, uninstall, time to buy the next one. I can't empathize with that at all.
Yeah, I mean,
I get comments all the time that say essentially, wow, imagine using glitches to ruin your playthrough of whatever. It's like, who told you you can only play it once? Where did you get this idea that a game can only be experienced one time or a movie can only be experienced one time?
yeah.
Please play it again. Please watch it again. You might learn something if you do that.
Yeah, and I feel like unless someone is genuinely stuck, they're probably not going to like do like a route like you or me when I was doing speedrunning stuff, or they'll like learn a glitch. Like to some degree, that's all more work in some cases than just doing the thing. Yeah,
I mean, mostly where my channel came from was that I really enjoy replaying games. So when you put, I mean, I'm talking to a speedrunner. When you put hundreds and hundreds of hours in something, like you just find, oh, that's weird when I interact with the lever while also sprinting, and you find random shit like that. And so then it's like, ooh, what other things can I find? So then you start searching it out, and then you discover the speedrun community.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I feel like that the thought you had about just the players, like, can extend just in general in a way to any media. Like, there's definitely people who just experience things at a surface level. Maybe they just have a gut reaction to whether they like it or not, but they don't think about it too often or too thoroughly about why they liked it or what they don't like or why, things like that of nature.
Right.
And I do feel like these media kind of fall into like a kind of a spectrum, because when I think of like music, for example, like you can critique it. There's definitely like music theory and all that, but it'll probably be a lot harder to explain to someone who just doesn't think like that. And even for me, like, if I just like the guttural feeling a song left me, at least it's only a couple minutes. It's not like I spent $60 on it either. So it can be a lot of harder to sell to criticize music than it can be like a movie or a video game to some degree.
Yes, but to build on your point, I'm not saying you need to know C++ in order to describe what is wrong with the hitboxes Dark Souls 2. I'm saying you can play Dark Souls 2 and be like, this feels sloppy, or I don't like the way this combat feels. You may not know the reason, just like you can listen to a song and be like, I don't like that song very much, I just, I don't care if people know why. I just like that people develop their own thoughts and opinions.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the thing about people who are more curious about different perspectives as opposed to like instantly antagonistic. Like, as long as you don't come at us like roasting us, you'll probably at least be interesting on your perspective. You're willing to say it, whether you like it or not.
That. Yeah, that actually is the wording that I need to start using. I wish people were more curious.
Yeah, and intellectually curious or just curious in general. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So for Dark Souls 2, I guess like I did get that impression just looking back. Like for me, I joined the community, or let's say I started playing like for real during Bloodborne. Like I did try Dark Souls 2 and I didn't really finish it. Not because I didn't like it at the time. I just dropped it eventually. Bloodborne was the first one I finished, and then I went back and stuff. But I also didn't fully get into the community until Dark Souls 3, I would say.
Okay.
But the impression I personally get when I look back on that kind of stuff is, yeah, like I think a lot of people were just excited for the next Dark Souls, especially being a direct sequel to Dark Souls 2, which I think generally speaking, a lot of people preferred over Demons, or at least were liked as much or whatever. So it had more expectation, I suppose, let's say. And I do get the impression that a lot of people, whether they change their opinion or not later, were definitely a little bit like, had the initial hype, the recency bias, as I like to call it. And then after that, or maybe on a rare occasion, some people just immediately were like not on board. Like it took a while, but some people definitely had to fight that. Like whether it's to fight against people who liked it or just their own, as time went on, like the more they had to realize, oh, maybe I don't like this as much as the previous one.
Right.
Yeah. So it's yeah.
Is this where we get into Dark Souls 3? Because there is no way for me to talk about Dark Souls 3 without just immediately outing myself.
That is the next question, more or less, if you want to just jump into that. The next one was like, have you felt the shift in how the community responds to criticism? So we can go from there any way you like as well.
I think Dark Souls 3 was that shift, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just for me personally, I was right there with you, right? Like, Dark Souls 3 is coming out. It's going to be great. Like, we just played Bloodborne. Bloodborne was fantastic. Bloodborne is my favorite game of all time. Now we're getting Dark Souls 3. This is going to be amazing. Pre-ordered it. Stayed up until midnight for it to launch. Started playing it the moment it dropped, right? I'm so excited. I did not like Dark Souls 3. I did not finish Dark Souls 3.
Oh, wow.
I thought Dark Souls 3 was a bad game. I thought it was copy-pasted assets from Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2, and that the lore didn't make any sense, and that the areas were bad, and I thought the bosses were sloppy, and I thought the damage numbers were too big, and it was overly punishing. And for many, many years, I did not have anything positive to say about Dark Souls 3 at all. I won't say that I like left the community, but I definitely I was more of a consumer for a while because of Dark Souls 3. And today, I have a slightly different opinion of Dark Souls 3. I appreciate it a bit more. I think people unfairly criticize Dark Souls 2 for things like, you go up the elevator in Earthen Peak, and then you're in a volcano, but if you look in the sky, there's no volcano there, and like the way the world connects and stuff, which I think that's a fair criticism. It could be a bit better. Dark Souls 3, the whole game is like that. Like, can we please talk about, like, when you go into the forest to then go down some stairs into the catacombs to then come out at the top of a mountain that is now in Orlando? Like, what are you talking about? Like, no. You are not allowed to criticize the world of Dark Souls 2 without also criticizing the world of Dark Souls 3. The interconnectivity of Dark Souls 1 and like the way Lordran was stacked on top of each other is just untouchable, in my opinion. But I don't think the world building is everything.
Yeah.
The thing that knocked me out of Dark Souls 3, the reason that I had so much trouble getting into it for years, was how much damage attacks do. And I don't just mean on you. I mean on enemies as well. And this is my biggest criticism about modern Souls, if you want to call it that. In Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 and even Dark Souls 2, every stat matters. And you can make a build that is all dex or all strength or all magic or whatever you want to do. In Dark Souls 3, the only stats that matter are vigor and endurance. You can put stats into those damage dealing, or put levels into those damage dealing stats, and it will increase your damage. But that damage does not matter. If you can just swing twice, you will do more damage than having, 40 strength or whatever on your hammer. I hate the way that they adjusted the algorithms and ratios and stuff in modern Souls to make it so heavily encouraged for you to have like 40 plus vigor. When I play old Souls, I usually don't level up health at all because you don't need it. And I don't know. That's a big issue that I have. When I went back and realized, like, oh no, this game is quite playable if I have 40 vigor. But if I have less than that, it's just suffering. Elden Ring is also that way. I don't like that about Elden Ring either. But I just, first thing I do is grind out some levels and get a bunch of health. And it's like, okay, well, now I can take hits.
Yeah.
I wish scaling was a bigger deal. And I wish the numbers overall for damage, both that you give and receive, were lower. Unless you just have like crazy 99, like in a stat or something. Like you should be able to get there, but you should have to really put effort into it, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that's even like if you put it the way I'm about to, like, I don't think it's a controversial thought or opinion. They definitely are more action than they are RPG after a certain point. And
exactly,
you could argue Bloodborne was kind of that because it's somewhat similar there too, but there's also less stats and stuff, so it kind of consciously did that. Dark Souls 3 onward,
you know
they
what?
kind of cosplay as an RPG, but not in
Yeah,
a sense.
I hadn't thought about that. It actually is possible that Bloodborne is also guilty of that,
Mhm.
but because the regain mechanic is there, like you get hit and you can jump in and get your health back from it. But I think without that mechanic, Bloodborne might severely suffer. So I think I might agree with you there.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to say the community has been trying to solve this issue. Like if you ever follow Ouroboros on Twitter or anything, Oro is constantly saying level vigor. Every comment, every tweet he makes is level vigor, get 40 vigor, get 50 vigor, get 60 vigor, please level up vigor. He's trying to like not only help the community but help PvP especially, because the game doesn't tell you this. But if you have less than 40, you are going to struggle.
Yeah, I see Peeve do it as well. Like I'm more of a Peeve guy personally.
Mhm.
I definitely see him kind of occasionally do that, and I know he sometimes gets a flashback against that, even though like I don't know. I think it's just understanding the mechanics and how it would fit the prior games more if you level vigor right off the bat at least or something. Like
Right.
Yeah.
I criticize the game for requiring it, but I don't criticize like Oro and Peeve for promoting it because like they're just trying to help people out, obviously.
Yeah, exactly, and it's playing with the cards you have basically. So
Exactly. Mhm.
yeah,
And I can get into it also. Like, when I make a glitch video or whatever, and it's like, I don't have to like a game to make a video about it. I'm just kind of, you just rewire your brain. You're like, oh, I got to go this way with it. But if we're talking about my personal opinion is that I wish having so much health wasn't a requirement.
Yeah. So Bloodborne at the very least with Bloodborne, even though people did realize it kind of is similar enough to a Souls game that they put it together as a Soulsborne, where Sekiro later wouldn't be. But yeah, like it definitely there's less stats. It pretty much is only health, endurance, and then any damage that you want essentially.
True.
So it kind of doesn't role play as an RPG as much as Dark Souls does. Well, Dark Souls is an RPG as well, but like Dark Souls 3 later, they kept the RPG kind of aspect to from Dark Souls, but has the combat speed and a lot of the aspects from Bloodborne, but it just didn't mesh as well in some regards anyway. Like I know some people prefer the game, and that's fine. But I guess like if you're looking at it from perspective like people like us, where we liked those aspects of Dark Souls 1 and whatever, it sounds like we would just prefer it if they didn't even try to make it an RPG at that point, in a sense. And you can maybe argue that's why Sekiro is really cool. I don't know what your thoughts on Sekiro are, but like at the very least, it focused on action almost entirely.
Yeah. Well, I love Sekiro.
Yeah. Okay.
But if Sekiro didn't have the
Deflect.
I forget what they call it now. The like the skill tree where you buy moves. I thought that was like integral to that game. Obviously, the deflection is what makes it.
Yeah.
But if I wasn't like grinding XP for something, I think I maybe would have lost a little interest over time.
Interesting. Yeah, for me.
And the funny thing about it is the moves don't really matter. Like you have Mercury counter, and then the rest of them you can kind of do without.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think for me in the first playthrough, I think I did play with some of the skills for sure. They weren't necessarily my go-to or anything. I definitely mostly deflected. I did eventually learn how to speedrun it, so I did learn how to mostly do without. I think only Mikiri.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you speedran Sekiro.
Yeah, I briefly speedrun most of them at least, like even if it's just a couple runs.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I did eventually learn. God, that was the hardest one. I'm gonna tell you right now, because you don't get
really. Oh no,
you don't get.
So don't tell me that. My plan is to stream Sekiro on like the 30th this month. And I've got to learn the like Shura route so I can do it in one sitting.
Oh,
I didn't realize I was gonna like suffer.
Shura is a little easier. I did Immortal Severance because I just wanted to do Ishin.
Yeah,
it's like my favorite.
Oh god, Ishin is rough. If you don't listen for the glitch video, I don't know if you've seen it. I did minimum bosses. Ishin made me want to die. I didn't think I was ever gonna beat Ishin with like base. Health and damage. I mean, it wasn't base. It was like +2 or whatever.
Okay. Well, in fairness, what was the most difficult was like the Fountainhead Palace area onward. So you might be fine. I haven't done Shura specifically. I think for the most part, everything before that is like you can script it to some degree. Like Like Guardian
Yeah.
Ape might be the hardest one in that department, but you can still script it once you get it down. It's just very precise, basically. So it might be fine. We'll see. But like I just have like PTSD memories of learning Ishin with like base health essentially, and it's just like it took a while to get there, but it kind of was really fun and satisfying once I got it down. Like I can do Ishin, or I could do Ishin like, base health, which is
I'll have to see what the route is. I don't know if minimum bosses even fights Guardian Ape.
if you do
can air
glitches,
swim and skip him.
Yeah, if you do glitches, yeah, I guess not. No.
It's probably
Yeah.
slower, is the
I was under the impression you're doing glitchless because that's what I did. But yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, you could skip a good chunk of the stuff. So yeah, you might actually not even be that bad. Yeah, if you're just doing air swim stuff.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've still got to learn how to do some of that stuff consistently.
Yeah,
air swimming is actually not too bad, at least in my opinion. But like the little stuff like ogre skip, like just those really precise jumps. Oh, I'm gonna be doing that for hours. It's gonna be rough.
Yeah, I think I tried to do that and like bowl, and I was like, oh fuck. Yeah, no, I did glitchless. That's
those are both
a big
rough.
important. Yeah, I did glitches, so that's an important distinction. Yeah, so I just very minor things. So that definitely will be a difference. So false alarm, I guess.
It is still Sekiro, yeah.
Yeah. So it definitely, to some degree, the fact that they stuck with action at least kind of made it more focused, and it did the fact that it's its own thing too. Like I would argue, Dark Souls 3 and even Elden Ring kind of try to be a lot of things at once, and to some people didn't work. Like I would say, I would say I'm one of them for Elden Ring specifically as well.
Yeah, no, I
like
would agree with that too. Certainly the DLC. I've been pretty open about like I don't like the DLC. Yeah. I didn't really enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean for me, I liked Elden Ring. Like I would say it's like an A tier game. I think Dark Souls 3 and 2 are like B and C respectively.
No, I like Elden Ring more than Dark Souls 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was an improved Dark Souls 4 basically.
Yeah, and the same thing. I didn't like DLC at all.
Yeah. I knew
As you knew,
opinions aligned on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like other things that From has done or might do in the future, hot take, I will be happy to state it here publicly. I hope the next thing they do does not have a stamina bar. I'm sick of stamina. Playing Sekiro showed me how much I enjoy not having stamina. And I guess this is not surprising if you know me, because lately, I do this in videos and stuff too. I max out stamina in every game I play. The character that I did the Elden Ring DLC with had 99 endurance. Like, I just don't want to think about it. I don't enjoy managing stamina anymore. I'm over it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I've thought about it sparingly, just here and there. I thought about the stamina bar. It does feel more and more useless or needless, redundant, whatever the word you want to use, compared to anything before Bloodborne, essentially. Because Bloodborne onward is when it became very generous to roll in general. But then you get to something like Radon, which is like that pushed my stamina bar, and it was already like max.
It was like 40. When you have to roll 20 times, exactly.
Yeah. So
the thing with me with stamina is like, and you know this from Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 and all that. The old Souls games, you can infinite combo as long as you have stamina.
Yeah.
But Elden Ring changed it. Elden Ring has static combos, and you end your combo after a while. Yeah. Why do I have a stamina bar if I can only swing 3 times and there's going to be a delay? Like, I don't like that.
Yeah, it almost like I would argue. Maybe I'm looking at it from a PvP standpoint mostly. So like maybe for base game it's whatever. But like whenever you have like an infinite combo, stamina is required. But like at the same time, a lot of the time spamming was really strong in the early games. So
yeah, that's true.
I think I would argue that like the limited combo was actually the better way to go. But maybe it came too late.
I'm fine with that. That's my point. Is like I'm cool with having a limited combo, but don't also limit my stamina. If you're gonna give me a limited combo, let me just swing.
Yep.
That's why in Elden Ring I just peg it out.
And not to mention too that like in Elden Ring, it's not like you get a lot of chances to fully do that in bosses or something. You know, it's mostly like on enemies you can just stun lock. Like you'll do that, but they're probably already dead by then anyway, unless they're like a.
It's when I'm surrounded by like 20 hollows. That's when I'm like, oh my god, right? I can only swing 4 times in a row or whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. Bringing it back to your thoughts on.
Soft track.
No, I mean we're good. I mean, yeah. So maybe we can bring this back to 2 as well. But did you ever voice your thoughts about Dark Souls 2 and 3, and were they received any particular way in the community?
Good question. I don't think I can answer that. I have never enjoyed being like. I've never enjoyed making like hate content. So like, I made a day 1 guide for Bloodborne. Right, I think I did like weekly videos or something, where I farmed enemies and like filled out the wikis and like found drop rates and all this kind of stuff, because I wanted to have early info out for Bloodborne, because I just knew immediately that I was going to love this game. So when Dark Souls 3 came out, I was like, okay, FromSoft, it's using Bloodborne's engine. I'm going to love this just as much. I love Dark Souls. I'm going to make a day 1 series for Dark Souls 3. And I played through to, I think, the Deacons is when I stopped. And by the time I beat the Deacons, I was like, I'm not enjoying this game. And I never said anything negative about it. All of my content was positive and, informative and trying to, help people through as a walkthrough should be. And then at that point, I just kind of, made a post on, community post didn't exist yet on YouTube, but I posted on Twitter. And I was like, okay, I am not enjoying the game, but I am willing to continue if you guys want the walkthrough series. Do you want me to continue the series until I beat the game? I will never, have anything negative to say about the game. I will continue as normal. Or do you want me to pivot and make content on something else that I enjoy? And by far, most of the votes were to pivot. And so I was like, okay. And so I just dropped it. And I think I shouted out like Fighting Cowboy or like someone else, that was making a good walkthrough series. I was like, if you, have been invested this far, here's someone you can watch that will take you for the rest of the way. But yeah, I don't know. I just, it's never been my style. I like talking about things that I like, and I don't like talking about things that I don't like.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm in a similar boat in that, most of my content up until like the ones I did last year, or like the one I released recently, but for the base game, where I kind of discuss little things that the rest of the games did better than Elden Ring, which I don't even think inherently is negative. It only is if you view it that way because you think I don't like Elden Ring, which I did.
Yeah. If that makes you mad, you came into the video mad, like that's on you.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Like for DLC, even though I did that, like that you can actually levy that against me, but like I'm not looking at it from that perspective. I'm just thinking of things they could have done better because they have in the past. But either way, so
yeah,
I was in a similar boat.
I don't want to interrupt you. I want to say this very briefly. When I watched your video, like this was, I don't know how quickly this was after the DLC came out. It was like within a few days for sure.
Yeah, the first one.
Where you were, where you were still doing the like, I don't want to say the name of this area, or I don't want to say the name of this boss, that kind of thing, and you were describing like, and you're not going to believe, you take a right and the same enemy is there again. And I was like laughing, but to this day, I'm like, I wonder which one he was talking about for this section. I wonder what he was talking about for this section. There was one in particular where you said something like, I just killed this lightning guy, and then the next thing I know, the next dungeon has another lightning guy. Were you talking about like the Death Knights for that?
I don't think I made it to the death. Maybe the first one.
I hadn't found one yet either when I had watched that video, and I was like, lightning guy? What is he talking about lightning guy? But I don't know. It's just, I don't want to.
I mean, now I'm curious.
I just thought it was very funny. Yeah, I know. The whole time I was watching it, I was like, say it.
I think I was talking about Jagged Peak, where there was the first Drake, and then like shortly after it was like the exact same boss essentially, but just with another one. I think that's what it's sounding like, because I don't remember them specifically being like something so close behind like that. Yeah, that is really funny. I mean, if you like,
it also could have been the Ghost Flame Dragons. I mean, they just copy and pasted those things.
I don't think it was that specifically, but like yeah, like if you ever go back to the video and link me, I can probably just clarify it. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I am curious myself too now. Because yeah, that sounds kind of funny. Like I've mixed thoughts about that video specifically because it was a little scattered. Like the later ones I did were bullet pointed, but I think I had to do that way.
Yeah, it was scattered, but it was like day 2. Like if you had to get something out, it had to be scattered, you know?
Yeah. Like and to some degree, I wanted to do bullet points, but I just couldn't find a proper way to structure it because I had too many thoughts, too many like conflicting ideas and stuff that I was like, okay.
Well, and the DLC's not linear either.
Yeah, that's
like most people explored it and like radially from the center, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think I found Jagged Peak a lot faster than people would have, or maybe not by that point. It was like 3 days later, but like most people went straight into the Relana Castle, and to me, it was like one of the last things I did basically for the first chunk of the game.
Weirdly, Jagged Peak was like the last area I found, just because I didn't find the little cave that had the Ancient Dragon Man or whatever in it. I just kept walking past it. So I had like all of the map other than the Jagged Peak area, and I was like, how do I get down there? Very weird.
I instantly saw from like the beginning area, so I was always curious. I always had it like in the back of my mind, and thankfully I found it fairly early. Well, I say thankfully, I didn't end up loving it too much. Besides the visuals.
Yeah. Ooh, I get to fight Bale first. Lucky me.
Yeah, that too. I think I lost my thought from before.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it was about Dark Souls 3. You were trying to get us back on.
Dark
you
Souls
said,
3.
yeah, you were talking about. Did you ever voice any of your opinions? And I basically said that I try not to do that.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. So for me specifically, this is kind of tangent, not even for the video, I don't think anymore. But since we were talking about it,
yeah, we're just talking at this point.
Yeah. For me, I was in a similar boat that I didn't really do like opinionated content, let's say, until that video, and even that I didn't really think it was negative per se. People just assumed that I didn't like Elden Ring for the nature of what I did, and I was like, oh, what? Like my brain just doesn't think that way. And I will admit that to some degree, I did want to shift in that direction because for context, my favorite like YouTuber ever is Matthew Matosis. Like I just always liked his criticism of games, and you know whether he liked the game or not, you know that sometimes that's kind of like irrelevant. He just talks about the issues with it, like a game. So I did always like that kind of content, and I can't say I can't say that I always wanted to be able to do a video game critique because I also would like to make a game one day, I think. So there's also that aspect of it. Like I would like to learn what makes a good game, and like what has made at least bad features in a game the way they are. So I feel like that's why I also kind of went in that direction, because I finally had something to say. Well, I mean, I did some stuff for Elden Ring too, but like the base game, but unfortunately for me, Shadows I just didn't like, so I felt like I had to get my thoughts out because I did want to get content out on that game in general. Like only before release, I only had like 1 or 2 ideas. After that, I had a lot more ideas, just kind of a happenstance that I didn't like it. But yeah. So, but I definitely wouldn't say it was intended to be hate content because I don't want to hate the game either. Like I know
I would not call that hate content.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess for your specifically, like the content you're doing, it would be in spite of not liking it. Essentially, you did the walkthrough of it, so I guess I can see how you mean by that. Yeah, I mean, so basically, you don't have much to say publicly, just occasionally, like and I think that makes sense because of the nature of your videos as well. Like you just don't do a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, my stuff is it's really never been opinionated. Even when I first started out on YouTube, it was more informative related stuff, and I saw the response people would get when they made videos like what you're describing, where how dare you criticize my game, that how dare you criticize Dark Souls 2 for having adaptability, so I learned very quickly, like, you don't win any prizes by going this route.
Gotcha. Yeah, like my streamer kind of moment, just defending your baby, and it's like, okay, like, dude, like, it's okay, like people it's weird how people get like parasocial almost with games. Like
they do. Yeah, they're like, how dare you attack the thing that if you say something bad about Majula, it will disappear. I'm like, I don't know what the problem is.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I think. Yeah, I think so. So next question. We're halfway there, depending on how we go from here. But this is more in line with the kind of the concept of the video. What did the phrase "get good" mean back when it was first used? As far as you know, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, well, the only way that I can answer this question, obviously, is how I interpreted the phrase when I first heard it, right?
Mhm.
The way that I saw Git Good most often in terms of the first times that I saw it posted. I don't know that that was ever really a GameFAQs phrase. I don't know that it's something people said a lot when Demon Souls was the current game. I think that was more of a Dark Souls 1 thing.
Mhm.
But I don't think they meant it in a hostile way. I think what they meant was, this is an action RPG. So make sure you have light load. Make sure you have a 100% physical block shield. Make sure that you're using only one damage type on your weapon, or that your stats are heavily benefiting your magic or fire, whatever your alternate damage type is. Then get good. And I think basically what they meant was like, here's all the things you need to do to optimize your build, but at a certain point, it has to be practice. And I think get good used to mean it's okay to die. Just don't give up, But now I think get good means put a decade into playing these games like I have, and then maybe you'll be as good as I am. Look how much better I am than you.
Mhm.
I think now it's a teasing thing. It's entitlement, and it's a superiority thing.
Yeah, it definitely comes across a lot that way. Yeah, the way it's been described to me is it started out as a kind of a tongue-in-cheek like way to like say like you just need to improve and stuff. Like it was never
Yeah.
actively hostile or like belittling, but it did occasionally get used that way. Like even in the beginning, like it did have its occasions.
Sure.
But the creation of it, I mean, the way I put it is like if you just look at the spelling of it, that should tell you all you need to know. Like it's supposed to be like, yeah, tongue in cheek is a good way to describe it. Like it's not necessarily a meme, but it was just a way to abbreviate the phrase. Like, yeah, you'll struggle, but like you'll need to struggle sometimes, but you'll get there.
No, that's actually a really good point. The way it's spelled sounds like you're putting on a voice as you say
it. Yeah. Like the SpongeBob meme, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and when I told Illusory about this, he definitely had thoughts about how people were trying to retroactively say how it was before. He thinks that there was always a divide, that some people didn't mean it that way, maybe just as much or a similar amount of people would use it kind of like hostilely in a way. So he admits that it probably wasn't innocently used all the time at first, at least. Maybe not even most of the time. But he still agreed the way people use it now to when you try to level criticism at the games and just try to use it as an easy deflect of like, no, you're just bad at the game, just get good. Like that's definitely bullshit and always has been, essentially.
I guess I'm maybe more apologetic when it comes to how people used it originally. I think it was more lighthearted than critical at first. But now I think it is almost all critical for sure. Like for example, like when Only Afro made his Giant Dad video, the point of the Giant Dad video is, I'm a PvP meta sheep. Look how tryhard I am. Laugh at me. And then people unironically took the build and started doing it in PvP. It's like, guys, no, you missed the point. The point is, if you dress up like Giant Dad, you're an asshole. That's the point.
That is funny thing about that way, yeah, because a lot of people glorify it as like this Giga Chad build, and it's like,
Yeah. Like, oh, the bass cannon, all the stuff in the background. Like he did everything he could to show that it was a joke. But yeah.
I mean, I do think that even if people did do that, they're probably in on it to some degree. But I wouldn't be surprised if some people did unironically were like, "Oh, this is the best build. All right, let's go." Or something.
Well, I mean, it unironically is good. Is the problem? The Chaos Header's kind of rough.
I mean, yeah, true. Yeah, that is a funny perspective. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, that has that same energy in that it's a tongue-in-cheek critique of the community or whatever at the time, and some people took it seriously. Like it's essentially the same thing.
Nuance is hard for some people.
I guess people just read things how they want to be read. I guess that's the issue, isn't it? At the end of the day,
I think that's what we're learning is you come in the room already having an opinion, and you're just going to gravitate to what confirms the opinion you already hold.
Yep. And I think that's also something Illusory said as well was what did he say? He said like when he's talking about the Git Gud phrase. Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, so the way people interpret it might have varied from the way people who used it back then would have said it. Like some people may have meant it just as a light encouragement, essentially, but people took it as like a skill issue phrase, essentially, because the skill issue is a lot more succinct than that.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to describe it. When people say "get good" now, they mean skill issue, and I don't think they used to feel that way.
Yeah, like that's the new way that people have said it, which I think is like from a different community, but yeah, it definitely easily carried itself to this kind of environment. So that's definitely because I mean that's something that there's gonna be discrepancy, I think, of how people read the phrase back then, because that's just how humans are. But I think that doesn't really change the fact that people use it in a toxic way when specifically living against criticism, essentially, which is a problem in general as well, because you just kind of close the discussion right there for yourself at the very least. Like you're not at that point, it doesn't seem like you're willing to listen to anything. You just assume this is perfect, and that
there's a lot of that too.
Yeah. Okay, last question, and I do wonder what your thoughts on it specific, because Illusory said he never thought about it that way.
Oh, okay.
Do you think the higher emphasis on challenge runs and things of that nature as of late could be a factor as well? That's how criticism is taken, I suppose.
Okay, let me think about this.
Because for the way I look
that
at
is a fascinating question.
Yeah. Because the way I look at it, I mean, like I said, I haven't been around as long, but to me, it feels like, as far as challenge runs, there was like your basics. There was like the rune level 1, stuff like that. Maybe no rolling, whatever it was. That's usually the extent of what people would do. It seems to me pre Dark Souls 3. I think Dark Souls 3 onward, the culture about challenge runs became a much bigger thing. And
there were quite a few people doing soul level 1 runs for Dark Souls 1. I remember that being a thing.
Yeah,
like Broken Straight Sword and like that kind of thing. Even back then, it was rare, certainly, but there were a few people doing it. There was one channel, I forget his name now. It was like Vegeta something with some numbers, but he was like a big challenge runner of Dark Souls 1 in like 2012 or whatever. Challenge runs, yeah. I'm gonna say no.
No.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna say no. I think challenge runs give you immunity from Git Gud. And I think it's unfairly earned sometimes. Like, I never have anybody in my comments say or say anything disparaging about like my skill in a game, even though like oftentimes when I use a glitch, it's easier than doing it the normal way. Not always, but a lot of times it is. I think people want to be superior. They want a feeling of I'm better than you in life in general. And video games is an excuse to do that because I can see the numbers, right? So I think like when it comes to I'm playing Elden Ring normally, you're playing Elden Ring normally. Well, my damage was 304 and yours was only 298. Like it's been able to, you can quantify the I'm better than you down to damage numbers, right? But if I'm doing a challenge run, you're like, I don't know who's better here because I don't know if I could do a broken straight sword run, you know? So I think it segments the community, but it segments the community in a healthy way. It's like what we're talking about with Demon Souls as it being healthier. Or when I say healthier, I mean more cordial and, you know, less rude overall. More welcoming to new players. That's what I mean to say. Demon Souls was more welcoming to new players because it was a smaller community. Elden Ring is a too big community. When you have challenge runners and you have speed runners and you have, like, you know, all these different groups that form PvPers, it segregates these communities into little subdivided communities that they themselves can be healthier than the overall community because they're trying to do something specific. So, like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be inclusive. What I'm saying is when you lump everybody together, the bad apples show up.
Yeah.
So I think being a challenge runner can give you some immunity from that, just like being a speedrunner can give you some immunity from that. I would say being a PvPer, but PvP is probably where a lot of the toxicity comes from. So I'll let them handle that. But there's a reason that I don't take part in that very often.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, for one, yeah, like I think that's a distinction that we made fairly early with Illusory's part of the interview was there's definitely a difference between, I guess, the fan base, which is just anyone who has played the game, and the community itself. And the only reason I look at it from a community perspective is to, like, show how, at least the intention of it originally, like for the Git Gud phrase, for instance, it wasn't meant like the way people take it now. People who just see, I've seen that meme and they take what they think it is from it or whatever.
Right.
Oh, actually, this is a good, interesting way that I think I should express to you as well, because we did definitely talk about discussion online in general. I think almost the whole interview was more so about the breaking down the psychology almost of like online interactions, where the way Illustrator described this kind of thing, like criticism levied at a game, and then people responding to that. He described it in a brilliant way, which he called it a drive-by comment or a drive-by response. Yeah, so I think
like that.
I think just from that you can probably get the gist. Like, yeah, so on Twitter and even on YouTube, people will just see a take or see a thumbnail title. They'll respond with their gut instinct without looking into it any further. That is a lot more common and easier to access these days than it would have been back then, because it's just more mainstream. It's just the way the internet's grown. And
well, okay, I'll build on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that goes back to what I said originally. It has to do with the size of the community.
Yeah.
And when I say community, I mean not necessarily like the Elden Ring community or the Souls community. I mean, like, the internet could be a community. It's the people that take part in whatever the platform is, right? When I'm talking about going on GameFAQs to read forum posts about Demon Souls, you probably saw the same username there like multiple times. If I go on Twitter, I'm never going to see the same person twice. If I go and read an Instagram comment, I'm never going to see the same username twice. So they're free to do a drive-by comment and say whatever they want to say because they know no one will ever see them again.
Yeah.
Like, you have a reputation to uphold if the community is small enough that you know you're going to be recognized. That's the difference.
Yeah, for sure. Like the anonymity of it all, yeah, definitely helps in a way for that. Yeah, that's definitely going to be a big part of the discussion, I think, for the video as well. Like, just a different thought that I hadn't specific. Oh, I mean, I probably knew about it subconsciously. Like, I've thought of it. Like, yeah, people just say their thoughts without wanting, I guess, much discussion out of it, especially in this kind of environment.
Berto, I have literally gotten comments. I say comments. There's one that sticks in my mind of a guy that was like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was just it was just blatant harassment is what it was. So, it was some comment like, "You suck, loser, delete this video." It was, like a hate comment, right? Imagine a hate comment on YouTube. And I replied and said something like, I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of like, "Did you think I wouldn't reply to this? Or did you think I wouldn't ban you for this?" Or I don't know what I said,
Did they
and
apologize?
he flipped like a switch. He goes, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't think anyone would actually read this. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I feel so bad now." I'm like, then why did you write it? Do people think when they leave a comment, it just goes up into the ether and explodes like a firework? Like, it's here forever. What do you mean? Of course I'm going to see the comment you made on my video. What are you talking about?
I surprisingly don't think I've had that yet. I think that usually would come from like younger people, I assume, anyway, or people who just don't understand that idea that, sure, some videos, like maybe some YouTubers are too big to read their own comments, but some might, and you don't know that because they don't comment back. That you just don't never know. But I mean, that's the whole anonymity thing of like, just
right. Well, to your point of the anonymity, I guess what I'm saying is like, maybe it doesn't matter because it seems as though, at least some people, there's this logical fallacy of they think they're anonymous, even though maybe they're not. They're like, "I have an account and I have a username, but it's okay. No one's actually going to see this." Actually, they can.
It reminds me of I think there's been a couple situations like this, but I remember one female user in Instagram got like a R-word threat or whatever, and they literally went to their profile, saw that they had their school listed there, and they called their principal. And they actually got fucking so
I'm so torn on that too, because like I hate this notion of like we can contact your employer and make you lose your livelihood or whatever because of something you said on the internet. I'm against that, but also like you gotta be accountable for the shit you say. So I don't know how I feel about it.
It's
just a little bit of half.
It's I would say, especially for someone who would be in school and stuff, like it definitely is a red flag that might not be registered, let's say, by the school or their parents or whatever. So in that one case, maybe it's good. And, for the principal, I would hope they didn't just expel, or whatever. Like, I would hope they just lecture them or whatever. And hopefully that person's doing better, I guess. But yeah, admittedly, especially with how easily it can be abused, especially how we're seeing, last couple of weeks with fucking Hassan and all that. Oof. Like, it's wild. It can definitely be abused, which is the shitty part, which most things can be, unfortunately. Anyway, back to the Dark Souls challenge runs thing. So the reason I thought of this question was because to some degree I feel like it could be like, if you disagree, that's perfectly fine, of course, and maybe I wouldn't even make it a point in the video because it would, unfortunately, even if I specifically say otherwise, people might take it as an attack on like challenge runs, for instance. But
oh god, yeah, that's true.
I think that the challenge run community or the challenge run environment that's formed in the last couple of years could inevitably have formed this idea in a lot of more casual viewers' head of, oh, this is like how you play the games or whatever, and this is how good you can be at the game. So they're not necessarily flawed. You just haven't gotten good enough at it or whatever. I don't think the top challenge runners or whatever like are necessarily,
of course,
fostering that. To some degree, like I'm not to say that people are not responsible for their community to some degree, but it could be an unfortunate side effect of that becoming a thing more recently as something that's known for. Like, people make articles about this, people beating, the games with one hand or with their mind, whatever it is. It could come across to the general community of like, oh, if you actually take the time to get good, this is how good you can be. You can not get hit at all or whatever. And people might internalize that as like, oh, people who criticize the game even normally or just aren't good enough or whatever. And
right. I guess that's the perspective that I see more.
Yeah. So it's a hard line because obviously, like I said, like I don't blame, the challenge runners for doing their living. Like I'm sure that it does very well for them to do the path they've done and stuff. And like I don't think they are like this. Like this is the main thing. Like
No, I understand that.
yeah, but I do feel like that could be an unfortunate side effect. It's as small as it be, because in reality, all we're talking about like is a vocal minority. I would hope at the end of the day.
I think it is for sure. Yeah.
But like, given that the vocal minority could have potentially been almost non-existent back in the day, especially when using the Git Gud phrase, it was just kind of used, maybe slightly ironically, in a sense. Yeah, like it could have just been an unfortunate cross of two different things. Like I don't think whoever thought of the Git Gud meme, even though it's probably just an offhand thing, whatever. Like I don't think they were hoping it would eventually be used to null any criticism of anything ever. But yeah,
right.
Yeah, so that was the main reason I thought of it that way. Yeah,
I think I'm gonna come out hard swinging defending the challenge run community. I don't think those things are related. Because, like I said, I do know of challenge runners from back then. Obviously, they were not as big, but the community was also not as big, so it's hard to know how that ratio balances out.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I see it, and this is going to come across kind of harsh, but this is how I feel about it. The people that cause problems in the community, and again, this is not just the Souls community, this is any community. They have a superiority complex. The reason that they are bragging about being better than someone else is because they think they are better than someone else. And that goes beyond the video game or, whatever the topic you're discussing is. That is how they feel as a person. The challenge run community is really great about showing people that they are not as good as they think they are. I think challenge runs and speed runs and all that are very healthy for the community because it keeps people in check. It reminds them that, if you're not one-shotting the boss, actually, you can improve still. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's actually, that is a sound analysis of that, yeah. Because, I mean, it's not like people who say Git Gud in a comment would reference Miss Mika or whatever to be like, oh, you need to play like her or whatever, like, yeah, like it's just like if they comment that, they probably are coming at it from like, oh, you're invalidating my accomplishment or something, which
exactly
like I did it too.
In fact, I would go so far as to say they probably haven't seen challenge runs, or they probably haven't watched speed runs, because once you watch a speed run, you learn very quickly, ooh, I am not as good as I think I am.
Yeah,
because that's the gist, right? Is like anything in life you can always improve at. You're never a master. There's always something more to learn. There's always something you can do better or do more of, and speedruns are the epitome of that. Every time we think we've hit like the, rock bottom of, okay, that's it, game can't be optimized anymore, somebody always figures out a better way. The speedrunning race never ends, and that's what's so fascinating, and really that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, actually, yeah, like I would say people who are like actively involved in the speedrunning, or not speedrunning, challenge running community, and I guess the speedrunning community as well, like they will, if they're invested in the journey at the very least, they will see how long it takes to grind that. People who just watch the highlight reel of the actual run and maybe that's all they do, they might get the wrong idea, but that's kind of how people can take the worst aspect of anything or whatever. Sure. Yeah, because I mean that happens with speedruns. Yeah, like people, I mean, take it from me, like people will sometimes see the final speedrun product on occasion and be like, oh, you're just fucking cheating or whatever. And it's like, bro, it took me like 3 months to get this one run. Like, what do you think we're doing? Like, do you think it just trivializes?
I get that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess you would as well. Yeah. And yeah,
this is really interesting because like I don't feel represented by any of these groups, but I'm tangentially related to all of them. Like I don't speedrun directly, but I do speedrun strats, and I don't really do challenge runs, but I do challenge run strats. And so it's like I feel like I've got like a toe in all these different groups to a certain degree.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's good. Yeah, like I mean, I would say that I at least dabble in most parts of community as well, even if sometimes more passively than others. Like I might take part in actively more than others, but yeah, it gives perspective. And I think that's what sucks and lacking for a lot of people who will just have these drive-by comment type things where they just assume a lot about you essentially, and make assumptions on the topic at hand or whatever, and don't
one
realize.
more thing I do want to say.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say they don't realize how much work some things go into it or whatever.
Oh, for sure, yeah. That's ultimately what it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think if people were more exposed to things in general, they would. Well, being cultured is good, right? Like the more you see, the more you realize, like, oh no, maybe I'm not as great as I think I am. Maybe maybe there's more to learn. Maybe different people have different opinions, and they can all be valuable.
Yeah, what were you gonna say?
But about the Get Good thing, use what you want to use of what I'm about to say. If you want to know where I think the problem lies, it's in the PvP community. And I am not saying there's any one particular like creator or anything like that in PvP that is causing the problem, but PvP directly competes players against another player, and because the PvP community has existed for so long, because obviously they, I mean, I'm sure there was a quote unquote PvP community in Demon Souls, but it was probably like 3 guys, right? But this really started in the forest in Dark Souls.
Yeah.
And it's just been carried up since. And of course, the Elden Ring PvP community is the biggest it's ever been. Going all the way back to our original discussion about how the meta is fun while you're figuring it out. And then once you figured it out, it's not fun anymore. That's what has happened to PvP. It has become so standardized for what weapons are good, exactly what your stats should be, what talismans you should be wearing at all times and when. Because the skill ceiling for this has gotten so high and the players are playing at such a high level that you don't have the flexibility in your equipment that you used to. So if you watch any, PvP content for Elden Ring in 2024, it's about, here's your loadout. Here are your stats. These are your talismans. And that's what they're taught, because they're not wrong. It is the best for this given situation. So those players, they're fairly uninformed players. They then go watch a challenge run, or they go watch a let's play or something like that of somebody, and they're like, oh, you're wearing Radagon Soar Seal? Don't you know that makes you take additional damage? Because they're thinking about it from a closed room PvP combat situation. But they're just fighting Godric. It has nothing to do with PvP. So maybe for their build, Radagon Soar Seal is exactly what they need to be wearing. Because this is an RPG. It's not, PvP is an element of it, but this is not a PvP game. It's not Street Fighter. So I think the competitiveness between players directly comes from that. This is the equipment you have to wear in order to be efficient at PvP. But that goes against, here's the equipment you have to wear to be good at speedrunning, or here's the equipment you have to wear to be good at this specific challenge run. And those individual communities are not the same size that the PvP community is. So, the guy that's doing the Broken Straight Sword run or whatever doesn't have multiple channels worth of videos defending his position, reminding everyone that no, Radagon Soar Seal is actually good at the beginning of the game when you don't have a lot of stats invested and don't have a lot of runes and et cetera, et cetera. I guess my point is, like, all the items in the game can be useful in different ways. And yes, some are better than others at given things, but there is no right or wrong answer. And I think that a lot of the PvP community teaches that there is a right and wrong answer.
I think there is something to that for sure. I think I would expand it to, like, the videos who it's hard to say where they'll fall in the community per se, or they do it all. But I would expect them to be the ones that are making YouTube videos on like, oh, this is the most broken build. A lot of them can be used for both. A lot of them are more specialized for one. But I think a lot of people who maybe aren't involved in the community, just know the game, maybe have struggled, just looked up a build that, oh, this is strong, the Moonveil's strong, whatever it is. Like,
yeah. Like
maybe they just take that and maybe apply this closed-minded perspective into everything when, yeah, like I said, it's an RPG. And some things may not always fit, and maybe people just willingly don't use.
Let's put the blame where it belongs, right? Like the people that take this and then decide to have a closed-minded approach and start saying, "Git Good, I'm better than you" in the comments, they're the problem. The content creator's not the problem. They are the problem. But if you want to know the root, there's like, and I'm not going to say their names, but there's a, one or two content creators, especially on like YouTube, that I imagine that do the like, this is the build you need to be using on patch 1.16. Everything else is garbage, that kind of thing. Yeah. And it's like, you're not helping the situation.
Yeah, if taken specifically from that angle, I can definitely see that. Yeah, like it just creates this like somewhat simplified solution to a, like a infinitely complex problem, which is just a RPG. You can use any weapon really in reality, especially in Elden Ring. Like there's very few weapons that are not viable compared to like Dark Souls 3 or something. So
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, and I mean, I don't specifically, like, you don't have to name or anything, and even if you did, I probably wouldn't put it in, but like, I can't think of any specific names, but I have seen some community people, mostly probably in the PvP side, where you can tell they kind of generate toxicity. I don't know where they're at now. Like I'm thinking of them back in like Dark Souls 3, but it definitely would create a lot of those kinds of problems. But at the same time, whenever I get a comment or a drive by a tweet or whatever for a thought, I don't usually assume they're from that either. Like it's just, I think it's just fans who, well, actually here, one thing I usually think about when it comes to these kinds of comments is that this has always been around. I think I talked about this with Illusory as well, with when it comes to video essay culture specifically, because video essays haven't been around forever. Like I want to say for us, we kind of narrowed down to like maybe Ego Raptor back in 2012 or something, or 2011. Like that's when it started to be a thing to criticize or glaze games for what they did right or what they did wrong.
I think I would give it to AVGN, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess for them specifically, it was more in a parody sense and maybe not as lengthy and stuff or as a breakdown. But I mean, to be fair, I haven't seen too much of him either.
But AVGN was playing a character too as well.
Yeah,
so
that too.
It's hard to say how much of it was his true opinion and how much was it him just
and to some degree so was and to some degree so was Aaron and stuff.
That's true.
But a lot of things he said, you could take at face value because like he was just exaggerating his reaction to it, I guess.
Yeah, I believe that Aaron really thought Mega Man shot lemons. I believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, lemons.
Yeah, so they haven't been around forever. And especially when it comes to critiquing the more critical videos, like those probably just had a more impact. Like specifically Ocarina of Time, his critique of Ocarina of Time always sticks out to me in my head because I can't really remember a time before that where Ocarina actually received criticism, like widely and by someone as big as him. Like I'm sure they did exist here and there, but I think even me, like, who wasn't necessarily my favorite Zelda, but I always thought of it as a good one. Like I was like, what? You think this game is not good? I mean, I don't think he'd go as far to say that, but yeah, like I feel like it can be traced back to around that era where there was a shift in like online discussion, and I do think most online commenters, people who interact with online regularly at least, so like hopefully eventually learn the lesson of like you can criticize something you like.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that is very important.
Yeah, like
that's a lesson that many people still have yet to learn somehow.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
don't know how we haven't figured it out by now.
I mean, I think that's the thing. I think people have learned that, but because there's so many people who come into YouTube like with a game eventually, like in this case, it would be Elden Ring. Like
Mhm.
maybe they weren't as active before until they got into this community, quote unquote, and then they saw criticism of a game they actually liked, and they're like, "Oh, how dare you!"
Yeah.
And hopefully,
Mhm.
eventually, they do learn this lesson of like, yeah, no, you can like something and still criticize it. That doesn't mean it's a bad game per se. Some people may say that, but you also don't need a like that doesn't have to make you change your opinion on it either. Like
Right.
it's more complicated or more nuanced than that, I guess I would say, personally. But like I'm sure most people who just have a modicum of critical thinking or curiosity may eventually learn this lesson, but like maybe not everyone.
You're asking a lot, Berto. I don't know. Modicum of critical thinking.
What can I say? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it is at the end of the day a vocal minority anyway. Like it's, and admittedly,
it for sure is. Yeah.
And,
well, okay.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to point this out as well.
Yeah.
I want to. Let me see if I can find the actual statistics. So I'm giving you like real numbers here.
Statistics.
I think you were going to say something.
We're getting a source.
Go ahead, because this is going to.
Yeah,
the source is my YouTube analytics. It's gonna be really scientific.
What was the thing? Oh heck, I'm at a lot. I mean, I don't think it was that important what I was about to say, but yeah, it was just along those thoughts of like, yeah, it's a vocal minority at the end of the day anyway. So, oh yeah, I guess what I was gonna say was that, you know, after, was it 2 weeks ago now? I definitely feel like in the grand scheme of things, this problem doesn't seem as important, and it really isn't. It's just something I personally wanted to address anyway, because, you know, I do feel like on occasion people need to kind of be...
No, I think this video is important to make.
Yeah. Sometimes people need to be scolded or lectured a little bit.
To be honest with you, I think a lot of people, especially in the Elden Ring content creation sphere in particular, have been feeling this topic and have been like, yeah, I'm not gonna get any, brownie points by complaining on the internet, so I'm just going to shut my mouth. But I think we all have kind of been feeling the same way about this. I can't find global statistics, but I can give you per video statistics on what I'm about to say here. You talking about it being a vocal minority? Let's see. For example, I'm running numbers in the calculator. Yes. Okay. Would you like to know the percentage of people that have left a comment? This is not a hate comment. This is a comment. The percentage of viewers that have left a comment on my glitches you can do in Bloodborne video.
How many?
It is 0.001%.
That's
you talk about this being
or something.
Yeah. You talk about this being a vocal minority. It is less than 0.001% of the people. But boy, are they loud.
Yeah, I guess let me follow that thought process too. Let me see. So
that has really helped me, like, just with mental health in general and being a content creator.
Yeah.
Because most comments you get are going to be either neutral or negative.
Yeah.
Most people do not comment and say, I hope you have a great day. That's just that's not how the internet works, right?
Yeah.
But being able to rationalize, like, no, the 99% of people that watch this are enjoying it. They're just not leaving a comment.
Yeah.
Like that actually is like very good and healthy, I think.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah, for sure. Let me see. Let me do two maths here, because there's two videos that I want to look at. So for me, the delayed attack video, it's sitting at an 81% like to dislike. So so that alone could tell you a good amount. It is currently at 60,000 views, and it's gotten 1,400 comments. So that is 0.02%. Oh, so that's that's 2% of people leaving a comment. I think, if I did that right.
So yours is quote unquote controversial.
Yeah, and even that is still just a fraction. Yeah.
2%. Yeah.
Yep. And then let me look at one other one.
And not all of those comments are hate comments.
No, actually, a good amount are receptive. That's another thing I was going to mention too. A lot of the top comments for people who have clicked on my video are people in agreement, actually, of whatever my point is.
I didn't disagree with anything you had to say in that video.
Yep. And here, another one that's even more telling, I could maybe say, is my very first Shadow of the Erdtree video, which, as you saw it and stuff, you know that it was probably not received very well because it's also like the gut reaction of the community, essentially.
Yeah, it's the kind of video that, like, even if you agree with what you had to say, you might dislike it today just because it's not like super relevant anymore. You know what I mean?
That, and also just like, you know, people are just coming off of the high of playing it. They might not be cordial to analytical stuff necessarily.
Very true.
Yeah. So that one is not as viewed, but it has the highest dislike bar, I think, of all my videos. It's almost exactly at 50%, which is honestly quite impressive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Yeah. Even that one has 4% of people leaving a comment. And I do believe even that, like the top comments at the very, I mean, let me just check, I guess. Yeah, comments.
No, when you said it had a 50% dislike, I thought you were going to tell me like, and 10% of people left a comment. 4% is still crazy.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, most people are not bad people. They're just chilling on YouTube and they watch a video and they're like, huh, and then they just click away. That's what most people do.
Yeah, I think that's what most normal people do too. Like I don't like people who just have this like gut reaction to that. Like, I mean, I can't say I've never been like, I never saw a video title and thumbnail that like annoyed me, but almost all the time, unless I think it's genuinely a toxic idea or something and I want to leave a comment, which I don't think I've necessarily even done, but almost all the time I just either don't watch it or like I watch it, I'm like, okay, I don't agree, and that's it. Or if I have a more nuanced opinion, I would at least give that nuanced opinion, not necessarily just good.
Right. And another thing to point out with this, and maybe I should have said this when we were talking about sequelitis and like Ocarina of Time and stuff like that. We have also learned as a society the monetary value in making content that is like intentionally controversial.
Yeah, polarized or negative.
Where you intentionally take a take that is the minority to get hate clicks and, you know, to generate comments that way and to get interaction and all that, because a view is a view is a view, and it all makes money. So I'm not saying that like Aaron, you know, was trying to do that with Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, he probably wouldn't have any idea.
Some people do, is my point.
I'm sure in his head too, he did not expect the backlash. Yeah, like I would say he was harsh in some regards, and thinks maybe he didn't need to, but at the same time, he like as we mentioned, he does to some degree play a character too. So you could always put it as like, oh, he's kind of exaggerating his response, even if he does think something is not great. He's not actually think it's like a garbage game or whatever. But yeah, I mean that's also part of the nature of like online creation as well. Yeah, like I got a comment one time that was trying to tell me like, oh, have you made positive videos on Elden Ring or the Shadows of the Erdtree, they'll just do better. And I'm like, what world do you live in? Like, do you not know what the news are like? What world
do you live in?
Yeah, do you not know what the news are like in the world?
That's the news. Like I turn on the TV and they're talking about all the wonderful things going on in the world.
Exactly. Yeah, like, how this man saved a puppy the other day. Yeah. Yeah, that blew my mind for sure. Yeah, and
that's wild.
Yeah.
That man's in a different universe.
Yeah, literally. I think I tweeted that. Like, I think I screenshot. I was like, man, I want to live in whatever world this guy lives in. Yeah. Oh, and just for that 50% video like ratio one. Yeah, like the top comments I think are at the very least just kind of like are like voicing some of their like critiques as well. Like they're not necessarily shedding on it. Like I don't think I shed on. Like that's the thing too. Like I think a lot of people just internalize and hear what they want to hear to some degree when they see a negative skewed video. Because I don't think I ever in my videos said Shadows of the Erdtree was bad. I think
No,
I
you
would
didn't.
agree with that sentiment, but I don't think that's productive at the end of the day to just say, like outright, like I would prefer to explain
Absolutely.
why I think something. You could argue that, but I never said it. Like people act like I am just shitting on it for the sake of it or whatever, and it's like no. Like, I know people do that, but I would hope I
Yeah,
stand up for the
I
crowd.
forget my exact wording when I because basically the only thing I've ever stated outright about the Elden Ring DLC was in my glitch video for it. Um, and obviously Radon is my that's what I consider to be the biggest issue.
Yeah.
I think my wording was something like, and this is coming from the person that intentionally doesn't include my opinion. And I think I said something like, "I've already stated my opinion of Radon on Twitter, so I won't do it again here." I think that's what I said.
On your
I made
glitch
to that
video?
point when I was when I was writing the script. I made it to that point, and I was like, "Oh, I can't not say something. This is so bad. I can't not say something."
Damn. Yeah, that goes to show, like, yeah, because I don't remember you ever really voicing a thought necessarily on, like, specifically the content of the game. You may just describe like a skip or something that's hard, I guess, but like that's not
Right.
even, yeah, that's just like describing your current technique or whatever.
Well, see, that's the thing, Berto, is like if somebody clicks on a video of mine, I assume they're a fan of the game. Like nobody's gonna want to watch glitches of something they don't like. So I can't say anything negative. Like I will only lose subscribers by doing that, you know.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's
Yeah.
also just not productive. Like,
Actually, yeah, I mean
my channel is not about giving my opinion. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's not a problem.
That's also something I one time got a comment on. I think it might have been during those like videos I made last year, the one thing I think X did better than Elden Ring or whatever. I think I got a comment that was like, if like people who don't like the games wouldn't make videos on it or something. And my gut reaction, because I think there's a lot of people. I think and that specific video I started by saying Elden Ring was somewhat controversial, and I still to this day I think get comments of like, what do you mean it's controversial? Like
No, I think it's controversial too.
yeah, like a lot of people kind of equate like things like sales with performance of a game or something. It's like no. That's not how it works.
Not the same.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot of people that will buy a game and never finish it.
Yeah, never finish it or just didn't like it or whatever. Yeah, like things like that. And I mean, people like what I would say, like, yeah, I've never seen anyone not like the game. Well, then you have information that I do because I've seen, like, I know Epic Gamer didn't like the game as much as some people. I know, like, when it comes to mine, Bionic Nova, like that she didn't like Elden Ring as much as Dark Souls 3, I think. Yeah. She still does challenge runs on it, like things like that.
I mean, put me in the camp. I don't like Elden Ring as much as Bloodborne, Sekiro, or Dark Souls 1 or Demon Souls.
Yeah.
I think it is better than Dark Souls 3, and that's about it.
Yeah, and we still made content out of Shadows of the Erdtree, which we both didn't like almost at all, or it sounds like.
Yeah, but we both got paid.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I kind of also was thinking from that too, is that you don't always know what people think. Like, Vadi Video is still going to make a lore video on the newest FromSoft game.
Yeah.
Even if he hates it. Like,
oh, and I maybe this is just me. I don't think Vadi is like, I don't think he hates Elden Ring lore or anything. But there were a few moments in like some lore for the DLC or whatever that was like, it's kind of loose lore, like maybe they didn't super, and Vadi's, like trying to explain the story or whatever, and like just the inflections in his voice and stuff, and he's like, oh, maybe that's just assumptions made on our part. Anyway, I'm just like, oh, you don't care. You don't care about this at all.
Yeah.
Like, I'm right there with you, bud.
yeah. I mean,
But there's some cool stuff in there too. I think the Saint Trina stuff's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you watched my latest video that I posted Saturday. One of the points that I thought that Dark Souls DLC did better was that I thought the lore was a lot more like it was a better expansion on the base game of Dark Souls 1, because
dude, the lore of Ulasil is just so good.
Yeah, and
like the Artorias stuff is so good.
Yeah, it brings back things from the actual base game, And
Mhm.
the
and it's a twist, is the thing.
that too, yeah.
The quote unquote twist of the DLC in Elden Ring was, oh, Mikola made a promise to Radon. That's not a twist.
Yeah, that's
Something you find out at the end's not a twist. Finding
yeah,
out that Artorias didn't kill Manus is a twist.
yeah. Like the fact that he failed, yeah, it's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to me that was definitely like a thing. Like I don't think this is an uncommon thought either. Like I think I've seen that one of the things that even people who like the DLC, who maybe even write Radon, aren't super engaged with the lore story that was there at the end of the DLC at the very least, because it's just kind of like, who asked for this? You know, like
Exactly, yeah.
yeah, like it.
No, in terms of lore in particular, I don't think I've heard any positive thing about the Elden Ring DLC.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Not that I spend a lot of time in like the lore, spheres or whatever, but just like random posts on Reddit and stuff, or mostly people just being like, I don't get it. Like, what did I miss? It's that kind of stuff, like not necessarily them being hostile towards it. They're just like,
yeah,
I don't get what there's to find here.
Yeah, that definitely, yeah, and the thing that sucks for me the most, I would say, is how you can tell how very unplanned a lot of it was. Like you can tell they kind of essentially retcon most of it.
Okay, well, this is my opinion, and I have no proof for this whatsoever. This is just gut feeling, so take what you will with this.
I think I know where you're going.
From the moment Elden Ring launched, the feeling that I've always had, because if you remember, Elden Ring was delayed. I think the Erdtree and Millennia were going to be DLC. I think they planned from the beginning, the conceptual stages of Elden Ring, we're going to make potential DLC for this if we need to. And so there were some people in the background kind of, working on like potential ideas. They probably did what they did with Dark Souls 1, which is kind of, like move enemies in and out of DLC as development's continuing, and you kind of use that as like a placeholder for ideas and all that, which there's nothing wrong with that. And I think Elden Ring got delayed so much, they were like, if we don't really give them a lot of content, then they're not going to, like, journalists and stuff are not going to, like, quote unquote forgive us for taking so long to develop this game. Just put what we were going to do for the DLC in the main game. And I think that's why it's kind of like shoved up in the corner and doesn't make a lot of sense where it is and all this sort of stuff. It feels like it was meant to be like a time travel thing almost, or like some kind of transport, like a DLC entrance would be. Then I think Elden Ring sold better than they could have ever possibly imagined. I think they thought Elden Ring was going to sell like Sekiro because it was a Souls-like kind of game. So when it exploded, they were like, shit, we got to make DLC now. And I think they had no ideas. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I do agree with that latter part. I think that my only problem with the first thought was Millennia was pretty big on the promotion right off the bat.
That's true.
I don't.
True. She was in the cutscene and stuff.
Yeah. Like I don't know to what degree they would do that and hype her up as like a forefront without being in the base game. I guess unless she was supposed to be more integrated into the base game adverse or something.
I guess Millennia in particular is not what feels weird to me. It's just the way the Erdtree as a whole is implemented that feels weird.
It is for the most part disconnected. Yeah, like the only other one that's disconnected like that is Fire Missoula, but that has.
I was gonna say Farum, yeah.
Yeah, like that has lore implications for that. Like that works fine. Erdtree itself, it could have been connected. Like there's no reason it couldn't have been. But yeah.
Also, since we're like saying positive things about Elden Ring. When I figured out that all the ruins and stuff in Limgrave were pieces of Farum Azula that fell down, that blew my mind. That was awesome. And I was like, all right, you know what? Kudos, Elden Ring. You got me. That was good.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever figured that out naturally myself, unfortunately. But yeah, like I think I did learn that. Yeah, it's a pretty cool detail, yeah. It definitely adds something there that generally you just take as generic ruins, yeah. Yeah.
And this is not just a Souls thing. I love when any media, a book or a movie or anything, puts a hint at the ending at the very beginning, so that like when you go back and you experience it a second time, you're like, it's that. That's just cool.
Yeah,
that's just good writing.
Yeah. And which actually brings me to the thing that I hate about the DLC is, like you said, I do 100% agree that at best, they had a door open there for being a DLC, because I think it was always obvious to everyone, because Mikola never showed up in the base game, that he would be the center point of, or at least a big part of the DLC that
Yeah, I
comes
don't
eventually.
think any of us were confused that you entered by going to the cocoon or whatever.
Yeah. Unless you're trying to be a contrarian, essentially, because I did see some people be like, "Oh no, DLC isn't actually gonna be about Mikola, or it's not gonna be there."
And Berto, actually, when we touch the cocoon, I don't know if you know this, an island is going to appear behind the cloud in the middle of the map.
Yeah, it's gonna be on a turtle. No, yeah. So
we'll need the hook shot.
yeah, yeah. So I think that was always left as a possible open. I think that's what they planned essentially. But I think it is so obvious that besides that, almost nothing in the DLC was actually planned ahead of time. And in that same video, the one I put out recently, for a different point for Bloodborne, or no, it was the same point. No, it was for Mesmer. I was talking about how, like, I think it's obvious that Mesmer is supposed to be like America's like skeleton in the closet, so to speak. Like she's I think the idea is that she hid his existence away because she wanted to be seen as more benevolent than she was in her ascension or whatever. And so she cast away Mesmer as just the, protection or whatever.
Right.
Like I guess in a way how, like in Game of Thrones, where like Tywin would blame the Bolton, or not Boltons, the Boltons as well, but the phrase for what happened at the Red Wedding, whatever it is, yeah. That kind of vein where someone else takes the blame for something. I get that idea, but when I look back on like Dark Souls 1 specifically, I think about Gwyn's firstborn, how he was also stricken from history, but it was already in there in the base game. Like you knew about him, and like that's a way you could have foreshadowed something like that. But as far as I know, Mesmer never was in the base game. So there's just a lot of little things like that.
But can we also talk about how when we went to Ulasil, we did not meet Gwyn's firstborn?
Yeah.
Like I like that they didn't tie every loose end in Dark Souls 1. I wish that was the case in all games. Like, as much as I wish we had gotten Sekiro DLC, the fact that you never actually meet Tomoe, and you're just like, you hear about this like lightning goddess that taught Ishin, that then taught Genichiro like how to wield lightning, and it's like, that's crazy shit. That's wild. And like, you never see her. You're just like, okay, I guess she existed. Yeah, I like that it's nebulous,
Yeah, there's certain aspects of it, yeah. Like, you can make an argument, for sure, about maybe Bloodborne and stuff like that, keeping things a little too obscure at times. But
Well, you're not gonna get me saying anything bad about my favorite game, Berto. I mean,
No, your favorite game is always perfect, of course. Yeah, so there could be arguments made both ways, but I do think that there is something to that for sure. Like the mystery of something, just keeping it kind of vague.
you can do it too much. I agree. You need structure, but also sometimes holding an answer or two can be fun.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's
yeah. In terms of Elden Ring, I would like to mention also Mesmer. Love Mesmer. Love the skeleton in the claws as you described it. I think that's a great description.
Yeah.
Something I do not like, and maybe you feel differently about this than me. When you use the gesture to move the statue and you get into the hinterlands, I think it's called, and you find the little like village that America is supposedly from, and it's like, oh yeah, this is the village where the Hornsent abused the people and turned them into warrior jars, and Marika was one of them. And after her abuse, she destroyed all the villages of the Hornsent. Then she came back and she planted a tree, the first ever tree. Like, it's like, stop. Like, we are connecting everything. No. This is not necessary. I did not need Marika to be connected to the warrior jars. This is way too specific. We're like, the shoes have got 18 knots in them at this point. Like, it's tied enough, I promise.
Yeah.
That just rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, all this stuff is too related.
Yeah. For one, like I actually didn't learn a lot of the details about that, like the warrior jar thing. I think I just had that, like, not explained to me, but like I just heard that in a video somewhere or something. And similar with the idea that the Hornson were the one who destroyed her village. Like I don't know specifically where that lore comes from, but I didn't learn that until later. And
yeah,
yeah, to some degree I think would have preferred it more, because in that same video, I don't know why it keeps coming up. I guess because it's recent Shadows stuff, but I also compared the research hall to Specimen Storehouse, and I just said that I thought the environment,
there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah. Like I thought the atmosphere and like atmosphere that they just say atmosphere twice, atmosphere and environment, whatever, of research hall is better because you feel like you feel like a sense of dread in this place, or like solemnness because of the little what do you call them, the research hall people, the scholars. I don't know.
Yeah. The patients.
Yeah, the patients.
I just call them the patients.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it means more to me because the research hall reminds me of Latria, but that is nostalgia talking right there. So
I can see that a little bit.
I won't let that voice be too loud.
Yeah. And a strong point, which I think is one of my strongest points in that video for me, was that when I got to the Specimen Storehouse, and especially when I saw the jar people, never in a million years would I have guessed that Mesmer is supposed to be like taking them as refugees or something. Like that is not.
No, I didn't get that either.
Yeah, that is not it's shown in the environment at all in any way.
If anything, it looks like he's like trapping them in the basement. Like,
that
looks like a prisoner. I don't know.
And given the name of the place, you would maybe think he's keeping them for experimentations or something. There's nothing. Yeah. There's nothing outside of any lore notes, which I didn't even find at the time, that tells you, hey, no.
Also, like, I'm cool with the Horn Scent as like a race, but I hate that we just like manufactured like a villain race and just stuck them in the DLC because we needed a villain, and they never appear in the main game. Like that, I don't like that.
A little bit, yeah. Like, and I mean, I don't even know how well they play into him as a villain necessarily either, in some regards, because you know the main person we see for the Hornson is the guy who's aligned with at first with Leda and stuff, yeah. And he mostly just seems like a tragic figure. He maybe wasn't involved in the original purging of the shaman or whatever.
Yeah, no, I don't think he was. I think he was meant to be kind of a gray area kind of guy.
Yeah, like a sense of the father type stuff.
I like him more than Leda. I can't stand Leda.
Yeah. And I actually do like the whole theme of revenge in the DLC. Like that's actually a pretty strong thing, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if the thing that bothers me too is actually also the idea that, and I might make a video on this eventually too, that FromSoft needs to stop making like story trailers and keeping them as such.
Yes.
Yes,
I agree with this.
Because as far as like things like Mesmer's actions and stuff like that in the story trailer in Shadows before the DLC came out, it does a lot. In the actual game, you don't see this. So what ends up happening is that it's a telling not showing situation for that. Like you hear about Mesmer's tyranny and stuff, and you believe it, but it's not until you see the trailer that you're like, oh yeah, this looks bad, isn't it? Like it's just so much more effective to show.
Right, but you can't see any of that in the game other than this building is kind of charred.
Yep.
You know, like it loses all the momentum.
Yep. The only other thing I've said, which is very subtle, is how his castle, the Shadowkeep, like stakes out in the Scatter Altus because it just contrasts like this nature and stuff. Like that's the only other thing that I would say is effective in that regard. But it's still kind of subtle as well.
I've got 2 points to raise about the DLC, and I'm curious what your opinion of them would be. I think the least controversial of these is this one. Most people, I think, have shared this sentiment. Instead of Mikola summoning
Godwin,
he should have been Godwin.
Yeah.
And we should have seen Mikola's slain brother. Like, okay, this is not shocking. But here's the one that I personally think, and it's a little bit more controversial. The Horn Scent, like I said, they're just kind of like a manufactured entity that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
I wish, instead of it being the Horn Scent versus Marika's people, it was
Aldenorex?
Radagon's people
Rad-
versus Marika's people.
Radagon.
That way it was like, oh, there were like two feuding families and they married each other. But I think that goes against the like, were Radagon and Marika ever two people, or were they always one person? And like they're trying to keep it nebulous and all that. But I think a really cool reveal would have been they were two people and they merged.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't exactly recall the lore of Radagon and what he's supposed to be as far as
There's
race.
not any, as far as I know.
Okay.
Right, like it's just like
Okay.
it's the alter ego of America. That's like all they ever really say.
Yeah. The thing is too that, like, I wholly agree with the first point. I think as well. Like, I think Godwin at the very least would have had some foreshadowing in the lore, because there is some small hints of Mikela and Godwin at least getting along, more than maybe some of the other siblings. Which, you know, God, George R. R. Martin's writing leaking in there.
Yeah, it's messy to say the least.
Yep. As far as
when you brought up Game of Thrones earlier, I didn't really think about just how relevant that example is.
Me neither, honestly. But yeah. So that could be the thing, and the Radagon thing I can see as well, because even if you can argue that like the lore wouldn't fit, like we're already creating things out of thin air in a sense, like
yeah, exactly.
Like creating something that at least ties back to the main game's narrative would at least be better. And the thing is too,
I guess that's the twist that I want. I wanted a twist that I could be like, oh my god, all of the main game foreshadowed this twist that the DLC has given us, and it would
almost be
I wanted an Ulasil again.
Yeah, and it'd almost be a double whammy too, because we learned during the Elden Ring base game that Marika and Radagon are the same person. If we then again learned concretely, because there was
that they used to be different, right?
Yeah. Like that they merged somehow. Yeah, like whether it be like a magical take on it or whatever. Yeah, like it's another interesting thought too. And yeah, like that's the thing that actually the Marika stuff I like. That's among my favorite lore in the DLC. Maybe not specifically about the Horn Scent necessarily, because I never even picked up on that. But
it's the Warrior Jar stuff that takes me out. But Marika in her village and all that is cool. I like
the Shaman village I actually loved a lot, because it contrasts so much from everything and even the base game so far. It was kind of like an abandoned workshop moment where, like, you know, you don't actually have any enemies here. It's literally just a little bit of world building. It gives you a different feeling.
That's rare,
yeah, exactly. And especially in Elden Ring, I feel like it sticks out even more, because everything feels so like manufactured in a way in this game, where everything just has a purpose, and that's clear. It's a checklist almost. And
it's true.
Yeah, so
and I'm complaining about the Warrior Jars, but I do like the fact that we had to fight the
innards or whatever.
Yeah, the innards. Like, that was cool. It was like, okay, this is kind of what I would imagine that it looks like, but now we get to see it. Like,
I don't necessarily mind them in itself, but I do think that the fact that you can even see them in like the jails, and they act exactly the same in the storehouse, makes that even worse, because there's nothing to allude to the fact that Mesmer's supposed to be taking care of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very half-assed, and like the Radon thing as well. I don't know what they're thinking with that necessarily. It's like the Godwin thing.
It was such a slap in the face for me specifically, because I don't know if we've talked about this. Radon is my least favorite boss in all of normal Elden Ring. Like, just the base game Elden Ring. I despised Radon. Any boss that like sucks you in or like moves where you are in a game about spacing irritates me.
Oof. Yeah,
so
it's not
the fact that like the gravity stuff came back was like,
that's what you mean. Okay.
I mean, like the moves where he like you're far away and then he just like sucks you in and slams the swords down. It's like, okay, cool. Well, then why did I sprint away? You know.
I don't think I mind that specifically, but Radon is a little tricky for me, because as that the late attack video goes to show, my especially initially reaction to a lot of the stuff in Elden Ring was so like very serious. Like Margit, Godric as well, even though he wasn't as hard as you got used to him. Radon, Radagon, even like they all have so much delay to their boss design that I'm
Mhm.
like, ugh, this is so annoying.
I
And-
don't specifically have a problem with delay as a concept, but it is very unintuitive. I'll give you that. But specifically for Radon, did you see like I think it was patch 1.15, I think maybe
105.
that quote unquote nerfed Radon. I mean, they changed lots of things, but one of the things that they changed in this quote unquote nerf that people were shouting about was they moved the hitboxes to be more aligned with his swords because he had several attacks where they were just way off. And so you would like dodge the sword and run into the hitbox. And it was like, guys, this is a good thing. Stop complaining about good things.
Yeah, a lot of people like. I guess it goes to show how we're talking about the elitism earlier, or whatever, or the superiority, where people just don't want to feel like their accomplishment was like diminished in any way. So they're like, oh, what, they nerfed them, so people aren't gonna fight what I fought anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like some weird.
All the replies on that patch are like, well, I fought the real Radon. Like if you fought real Radon. Like shut up, guys. You're
Yeah.
the worst.
Yeah, that's definitely just like, ugh, okay, come on, man. It's almost like if we're assuming this kind of people are the same that would comment like Git Good on something like that. I think the reason it would annoy them is because it kind of delegitimizes their thoughts of like, oh no, you just need to get good when the developers disagree with
Right.
you. When they're like, no, this is actually too rough.
The thing about that is like this is FromSoft. You know, like it's not like Ubisoft added a beginner difficulty to the new game. Like this is FromSoft. You know, if they're making an adjustment, it's still going to be hard.
Yep. And it's not like Radon is probably any easier for any first players either. Like outside of any like hitbox shenanigans, literally, like you said. Like I think I learned that the meteors that he like throws, the 4, I think those had like a, or not hitbox, but I think they had like a damage multiplier or something that was way off.
Oh yeah, it was like some kind of like underflow or like a mistake, I think.
Yeah, like they just made them a lot more deadly than they should be. I mean, you're still probably gonna die to them anyway. So
Fairchild, that just you're just triggering me right now because you're reminding me of comments that I get. I don't know how familiar you are with Castlevania, but
very little.
I have a glitch video for Symphony of the Night, and the final glitch that I show off is you do a series of things to make a shield that you hold up deal 255 damage per frame every frame that it touches an enemy. Okay, this is obviously a glitch. It's a shield. Now you could make the argument that it was intended for this shield to deal damage. It would be the only shield in the game that does this. It would deal damage per frame. The only weapon in the game that does this. Okay.
Damn.
But you could make the argument that this is intentional. My argument is that the number 255 is what you get when an 8-bit variable underflows.
Yeah, rolls over.
Yeah, this is a glitch. And yet, if you go to my video, there is comment after comment after comment saying it is not a glitch and it's an intended feature and they just put an overpowered shield in the game. It's like I can't explain this to you. If you don't know why this is not intended, I can't explain it to you.
Yeah, it's admittedly it would be an insane gray area back then, because we're talking about a time when, you know, from time to time people like devs would just include like a cheat, or like a cheat code thing, or like a overpowered thing once you beat the game or whatever it is. Like I haven't specifically played Symphony of the Night, but that does.
And look, I don't know for a fact, but they could have programmed it to be 999 is my point. The fact that it's 255, that is the thing that really, but yeah, we don't have to go on this stage.
Yeah,
I had to mention that because
yeah, 254 is the top number, and then 255 would be rolling back or something. Yeah.
It's 256 is the top number,
oh, 5,
and
6.
then it rolls down because the 5-6 is occupied by 0.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah. But I guess for anyone who isn't as versed in not even a games program, just a basic like digital,
just basic programming.
Yeah, just digital counting thing. Yeah, like you understand how
you do the
works.
same thing in in a link to the past, you can do a glitch to set your key value to -1, and it gives you 255 keys.
Yeah.
And you can do the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's how it works with the dupe glitch in Demon's Souls as well. You essentially overflow and like with -1. And
Yeah, but I don't know what the bit value is for the variables in your inventory in Demon's Souls, but it's always ends up at like a weird number. It's like
it's
1,300 or something, isn't it?
It's 1,024, which I think is also like right before you flow.
1,024. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like I don't know which specific.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it is also one of those numbers. Yeah.
Maybe it's.
I mean, once
I'm not
you
sure.
retrieve it, it does run down to 999 because that's the max you can hold
Yeah.
for most things. But yeah, that literally is underflow. Like you could not argue otherwise unless you just don't understand.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry for the Vietnam flashback. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's insane, but I don't know. I guess that's how a lot of people are just like they're not necessarily as I don't know. When I say it like this, it sounds kind of like high horse talk, so I don't like to say that, but it definitely sounds like a lot of people are just not intellectually curious to that degree where they're.
No, I don't think that's high horse at all. I think that is factually true.
I do think so. I just sometimes I guess because I am more self-critical. Like I do try to learn.
Okay, and when we say quote unquote most people, we're talking about comments, which as we've established is not most people.
True.
But,
yeah, the vocal minority. True.
The vocal minority, exactly.
Yeah.
I do not envy you having to edit this interview.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I'm looking at our time, and we've talked for over 2 hours at this point. I think I spent less than 10% of this conversation actually answering your questions.
I mean, that's fine. Like there are some.
When you find them, it'll be easy.